Taking advantage of this opportunity, Han Li channeled his heavenly baleful purgatory arts and true spirit bloodlines in unison, and a cloud of devilish chi surged out of his body alongside a flash of silver lightning as he transformed into a massive bird with 3 different heads, namely those of the lightning bird, the heavenly phoenix, and the azure loon bird. The 3-headed bird was over 1,000 feet in size, and it had a pair of azure and crimson wings, as well as a massive tail consisting of 7 fiery feathers. Its talons were silver in color and as sharp as blades, and there were arcs of silver lightning flashing over them. The giant bird spread its wings, and 2 gusts of fierce, azure wind were released, propelling it up into the air. At the same time, jets of crimson flames erupted out of its tail feathers, while a torrent of silver lightning surged out of its talons. In the blink of an eye, the giant bird had accelerated to a mind-boggling speed, and after just a few flaps of its wings, it had already vanished into the distant sky. Kai Meng's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, while Immortal Lord Miao Fa's body began to dissipate into a flurry of snowflakes as she set off in pursuit of Han Li. So he really does have some tricks up his sleeve. This is turning out to be much more fun than I expected. Kai Meng grinned to herself, not looking concerned in the slightest. Immediately thereafter, she also set off in pursuit of Han Li atop her fiery, red cloud. Meanwhile, Han Li was fleeing with all his might. In his current form, his speed was inferior by much compared with using his lighting teleportation formation, and he had the advantage of being able to travel continuously, rather than having to stop to conjure up new lightning formations between bouts of teleportation. However, it didn't take long before the surrounding air temperature began to plummet again, and a vast cloud of white mist appeared around Han Li. As soon as Han Li flew into the cloud of white mist, he immediately felt as if he had crashed headfirst into a wall of wind and snow, slowing him down significantly. Han Li couldn't help but be stunned by the enormous area that Immortal Lord Miao Fa's spirit domain was able to encompass, as well as the power of the structures manifested by the creation tier spirit domain, such as the wall of ice from earlier and this fearsome snowstorm. Clearly, the disparity of a single cultivation rank wasn't an accurate reflection of the vast gap between early and mid-grade encompassment cultivators. However, there was no time for Han Li to ponder all of this as he opened all 3 of his beaks in unison, releasing an azure whirlwind, a pillar of silver lightning, and a plume of crimson flames that fused as one in midair to form a vibrant and colorful pillar of light that erupted directly forward. The pillar of light appeared extremely out of place in the bland, white snowstorm, and it blasted a huge hole that was tens of thousands of kilometers in length through the snowstorm, allowing Han Li to pass through it without any further obstruction. After passing through the snowstorm, Han Li discovered that what was supposed to have been a summer's day had turned into winter, and that the entire landscape had been encased in ice as far as the eyes could see. Before Han Li had a chance to even fully take in his surroundings, Immortal Lord Miao Fa's voice suddenly rang out from behind him. "I'll admit that you have quite a few tricks up your sleeve for a mere high-zenith cultivator, but what are you going to do now?" As soon as her voice trailed off, a huge shadow began to appear directly ahead of Han Li, one that seemed to connect the heavens to the earth. Han Li could immediately tell that this was none other than the same wall of ice that had obstructed him earlier, and he immediately channeled his reversal true axis to roughly double his own speed. A layer of glacial chi was spreading down the wall of ice, and in the blink of an eye, it had already spread over half of the wall. Han Li could only swoop down to fly toward the bottom half of the wall, which still hadn't yet frozen solid. However, even with his incredible speed, he was unable to outrun the spreading glacial chi, and it looked as if the wall were going to fully freeze solid before he could reach it. Right at this moment, A burst of silver lightning flashed through the eyes of his lightning bird head, and two balls of silver lightning that he had been charging up for quite some time erupted out of his talons to strike the foot of the wall of ice. An earth-shattering thunderclap rang out as that section of the wall of ice exploded into countless shards of ice, creating a huge hole that Han Li was able to pass through. Immediately thereafter, he spread his wings again to regain altitude and continued to flee into the distance. A furious look flashed through Immortal Lord Miao Fa's eyes upon seeing this, and right at this moment, she suddenly noticed that Kai Meng was nowhere to be found. Even after flying through the wall of ice, Han Li knew that he couldn't grow complacent, and he continued to channel his reversal true axis ability, burning through his immortal spiritual power and law powers at an alarming rate. Thanks to his tireless efforts, he was able to slowly open up a gap between himself and Immortal Lord Miao Fa, but before he even had a chance to catch his breath, a burst of radiant, white light suddenly appeared up ahead, and Kai Meng emerged within it. The white light was so bright that Han Li reflexively narrowed his eyes against it, and in the next instant, an enormous, semi-transparent dome of light descended from above, crashing down upon him before forcing him to the ground. Han Li flapped his wings with all his might to dart forward through the air, only to crash into the dome of light, which shuddered violently upon impact. A dense layer of runes then emerged over its surface, giving off peculiar energy fluctuations as they converged toward Han Li from all directions, rocking his soul violently while forcing him to the ground. Upon landing on the ground, Han Li reverted back to his human form, and the dome of light around him quickly shrank down to only the size of a house. Han Li looked around to discover that the dome of light resembled an upside-down bowl, and that its surface was riddled with countless runes. There were also 9 fiery, crimson dragons coiled on top of the dome, and all of them were glowering down at him in a menacing fashion. Han Li could detect extremely formidable fire law power fluctuations emanating from the 9 dragons, and by his estimate, this had to have at least been a 5th-tier immortal treasure. After capturing Han Li using the Dome of Light, Kai Meng descended out of the sky as she remarked in a disappointed manner, "You're nothing special, after all. All you've done is run like a coward up to this point. How on earth were those idiots from the Golden Origin Immortal Palace wiped out by you? They're a disgrace to our heavenly court." Han Li paid no heed to her disappointed musings, as he activated his infernal devilish eyes to closely examine the immortal treasure, hoping to identify some point of vulnerability that would allow him to escape. Just give it up. This 9-dragon divine fire dome is a 4th-tier immortal treasure that even a great encompassment cultivator would struggle to escape from, let alone a mere high-zenith cultivator like yourself. Just surrender to spare yourself the physical punishment, Kai Meng coaxed. After inspecting the entire dome, Han Li discovered that he was surrounded by a ring of formidable law powers, with no vulnerabilities to be exploited. Right at this moment, Immortal Lord Miao Fa also arrived on the scene, and her brows furrowed slightly at the sight that she was greeted by. "You're too late, he's already my prisoner," Kai Meng gloated with a triumphant smile. "Is that so? But I don't see any shackles around him. If all you've done is trap him, then didn't I already accomplish the same thing earlier?" Immortal Lord Miao Fa objected. "Clearly, neither of us is going to be able to convince the other, so let's just finish our battle and let the outcome decide who gets to keep him," Kai Meng said. "Sounds good to me." Immortal Lord Miao Fa harumphed coldly as she sprang up into the air. Kai Meng was just about to set off in pursuit when she suddenly seemed to have recalled something, and she turned to Han Li as she warned, "Don't try any funny business. If you struggle recklessly in my 9-dragon divine fire dome, you could easily end up dead. Unlike Miao Fa, I actually want to keep you alive." After that, she flew up into the air in pursuit of immortal Lord Miao Fa, and a burst of tremendous pressure descended from the heavens as both women flew up into the clouds. Half of the sky was set alight by scorching red flames, while the other half of the sky had been devoured by a glacial snowstorm, but Han Li had no time to appreciate the spectacle. After taking a moment to compose himself, he removed his profound heavenly gourd from his waist, then tipped it over so that its opening was aimed at a point where the underside of the dome was in contact with the ground. Han Li took a deep breath, then slammed a hand into the underside of the gourd, and a burst of rumbling instantly rang out from within. A vortex of azure light emerged from the mouth of the gourd, and a thread of dark green light shot out from within. A resounding boom rang out as a beam of light that was imbued with the laws of destruction struck the nine-dragon divine fire dome, before exploding into a small, green cloud. The dome shuddered violently, but it remained completely unscathed. And to make matters even worse, the 5 out of the 9 dragons above the dome suddenly seemed to have sprung to life, opening their cavernous mouths to blast forth torrents of scorching flames toward the dome beneath them. The entire space within the dome was instantly inundated by 5 bursts of viscous flames, and as soon as the flames came into contact with Han Li's body, he was struck by an unprecedented sense of agony that caused a heart-wrenching howl to escape from his lips. The essence fire raven instantly flew out of his body of its own accord, forming a fiery, silver outer garment around him to keep the viscous flames at bay. Even so, waves of indescribable heat continued to infiltrate his body, inflicting upon him intense agony. While protecting Han Li, the essence fire raven opened its beak to release a torrent of silver flames that resisted the flames that continued to surge down from above, and the clashing silver and crimson flames formed a two-colored fiery barrier above Han Li's head. Han Li's heart sank even further upon seeing this. In the past, whenever the essence fire raven had encountered fire attribute attacks, it had always chosen to devour them. However, on this occasion, it was doing the exact opposite, and Han Li hurriedly asked it why this was the case through their spiritual connection. In response, the essence fire raven informed him that these flames were imbued with Ha's special type of fire law powers, thereby making it impossible to devour. On top of that, it was also very clear that the essence fire raven was being dominated by these crimson flames. To compound Han Li's woes even further, the remaining 4 fiery dragons seemed to have also been enraged by the essence fire raven's resistance, and they began blasting flames down into the dome as well. The 9 bursts of crimson flames formed an inescapable barrage that inundated Han Li from all directions, and the essence fire raven was forced to give up its resistance as it focused solely on protecting Han Li. However, the collective power of all 9 dragons was far more formidable than just the 5 from before, and even the essence fire raven was struggling to withstand the assault. What was even more concerning was that the 9-dragon divine fire dome seemed to also possess the ability to absorb all fire attribute power, so a great deal of the essence fire raven's power was being sucked into the dome. Of course, Han Li wasn't just going to accept his fate, and he was attacking the dome with all his might with his 36 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords, but the dome simply refused to budge. As time passed, the essence fire raven's silver flames had been whittled down significantly, but the 9-dragon divine fire dome was only growing more and more powerful, and the fiery assault was quickly becoming too much for Han Li to bear. Right at this moment, the essence fire raven suddenly opened its mouth to release a white bead, and it hovered above Han Li like a lamp while giving off rays of dazzling white light. Enhanced by these rays of white light, the silver flames around the essence fire raven's body instantly reared up to force back the oncoming crimson flames. Han Li was immediately able to identify the white bead as the fire attribute immortal treasure that he had obtained from the Ian Pagoda. He had thought that it had already been refined and absorbed by the essence fire raven, but that was clearly not the case. However, the resistance didn't last long before the white bead was also forced downward by the crimson flames, and the 9 fiery dragons had even personally made their way into the dome to surround the white bead in a menacing fashion. Much of the bead's power had already been exhausted by the 5-elemental Great Annihilation formation, and after having so much of its remaining power absorbed by the essence fire raven, it was nowhere near powerful enough to contend with the 9-dragon divine fire dome. At the same time, all of the crimson flames within the entire domain abruptly converged around Han Li to form a fiery, crimson cocoon, as if it had been compressed by some type of powerful force. The temperature inside the fiery cocoon reached an extremely inhospitable level, and Han Li's skin began to crack open like a dry lake bed. The essence fire raven immediately sprang into action upon seeing this, and the rainbow flames on its head brightened significantly, following which 2 of them, namely the crimson and orange flames, rose up from its head before fusing into the white bead above. A white cocoon of flames took shape around the bead to keep the crimson flames at bay, finally allowing Han Li some breathing room. The essence fire raven had sacrificed 2 of its rainbow fire pill sand flames to save him, and a hint of guilt welled up in his heart upon seeing this, but he still didn't know how to get himself out of this predicament. Right at this moment, a furious voice suddenly rang out in front of his chest. "Are you an idiot? If you can't beat them, then just run. I can't believe you're stuck here when you're capable of transmigration at will." "Who's there?" Han Li asked in an alarmed manner. The voice was rather indistinct, and it was unclear where it had come from, but it had struck Han Li as rather familiar. All of a sudden, a look of realization appeared on his face, and he hurriedly reached down the front of his own robe to fish out the heaven-controlling vial. The vial appeared no different from normal, but right at this moment, a pair of beady, pea-sized, black eyes suddenly appeared on its surface, and they were looking up at Han Li with a very humanized look of anger. "Were you the one who spoke just now, Senior Vile Spirit?" Han Li hurriedly asked. "Who else could it have been but me? I can't believe you've been backed into a corner by a great encompassment cultivator and a mere 4th-tier immortal treasure. You're an utter disgrace," the Vile Spirit reprimanded. "I did consider making an escape using transmigration, but if I flee from here, won't the heaven-controlling vial be left behind and fall into the hands of others?" Han Li asked. "Is the heaven-controlling vial more important than your life?" the Vile Spirit asked. "My life is important, but the heaven-controlling vial has been with me ever since the beginning of my cultivation journey, so it's just as important to me. Besides, even if I can temporarily get away, I'll eventually have to return here anyway, so it makes no difference," Han Li replied. The Vile Spirit seemed to be quite pleased with this answer, and it said, "It looks like I made the right decision to come and save you. During your past transmigrations, the heaven-controlling vial is left without an owner, so it remains where you were, serving as a space-time anchor for your return. However, I can make it so that the heaven-controlling vial transmigrates with you, and with no anchor left behind, you won't return to this place." "That's fantastic," Han Li said as an ecstatic look appeared on his face. "Don't celebrate too soon now. I can do this for you, but it'll cost you. Taking the vial into the river of time will cost you 30 time law threads, and that's permanent, as in they'll be gone and unrecoverable," the Vile Spirit said. Time law threads were very difficult to come by, so sacrificing 30 of them at once was certainly a painful decision to make. But given the dire situation that Han Li was in, he really had no choice in the matter. "Please tell me what I need to do, Senior," he implored. "Just conjure up the wall of light and leave the rest to me. the vile spirit replied. Hanli nodded in response, then began channeling his great 5 elemental illusion mantra, and his 5 time attribute law treasures appeared around him amid a burst of time law power fluctuations. The time law threads around the 5 treasures then intertwined with one another to form the ring of time, and all of the time Tao runes on the 5 law treasures flew out before landing upon the golden ring, producing incredibly formidable bursts of time law power fluctuations. Upon detecting these time law power fluctuations, Immortal Lord Miao Fa and Kai Meng instantly realized that something was wrong, and they hurriedly called a temporary truce before descending back down to the ground. At this moment, there was a ball of dark green light within the 9-dragon divine fire dome that was glowing as radiantly as the sun, and the space around the ball of light was rippling incessantly. Immediately thereafter, a huge wall of translucent light appeared, and Han Li was standing before it. He withdrew the essence fire raven into his body while gritting his teeth against the oncoming crimson flames, then took a glance back at Immortal Lord Miao Fa and Kai Meng before flying straight into the wall of translucent light. The 2 women could only look on as Han Li vanished into the wall of light without a trace. As Immortal Lord Miao Fa stormed onto the scene, an ecstatic look suddenly appeared on her face as she spotted something within the shrinking ball of green light. It's the heaven-controlling vial. She immediately accelerated, swooping downward as quickly as she could, but right at this moment, a golden ring emerged within the ball of green light, and 30-time law threads split off from it before disintegrating into a cloud of translucent powder that flew into the green light. The green light instantly shrank down to form a small green vial, which vanished into the wall of the translucent light along with the golden ring. No! Immortal Lord Miao Fa roared in a furious voice as the heaven-controlling vial slipped away right before her eyes. Kai Meng withdrew the 9-dragon divine fire dome with a dark expression, but before the 2 of them had a chance to approach the translucent wall of light, it had already vanished into thin air, leaving only a burst of faint time law power fluctuations in its wake. Immortal Lord Miao Fa was barely able to contain her own fury as she turned to glower at Kai Meng. If it wasn't for Kai Meng's meddling, she would have already returned to the 9 Origins Temple with Han Li and the heaven-controlling vial, and that would have been the biggest accomplishment anyone in the temple had made in the past tens of millions of years. Kai Meng's brows furrowed slightly at the sight of Immortal Lord Miao Fa's enraged expression, and she said, "The target is already gone, so there's no point in continuing this senseless battle." Before she had a chance to finish, a volley of bone-chilling ice arrows had already come hurtling toward her. A cold look flashed through Kai Meng's face upon seeing this, and she sprang directly toward Immortal Lord Miao Fa as she harumphed, "Fine. I tried to settle this peacefully, but you clearly insist on a fight." Thus, their battle recommenced, while Lan Yan and Immortal Lord Miao Fa's maidservants were all watching from tens of thousands of kilometers away, with none of them daring to approach the scene. I wonder how fellow Taoist Han is doing. As soon as this thought sprang up in Lan Yan's mind, she was immediately struck by a pang of guilt toward her sect, and she could only heave a forlorn, internal sigh. Ali. Meanwhile, Han Li was already beside the vast river of time. Countless water-droplet-shaped balls of light were flowing through the river, stretching as far as the eyes could see. Right at this moment, 2 streaks of light, one golden and one green, sped toward him from afar. Within the streak of golden light was a golden ring that slid itself onto his finger, while the ball of green light landed in his grasp before transforming into the heaven-controlling vial. "What are you just standing here for? Now that you've brought the heaven-controlling vial into this place, your time Tao runes will be expended far faster than normal, So hurry and choose a destination for your transmigration, the vile spirit urged. With no opportunity to plan in advance, Han Li was a little hesitant, unsure of where to go. After some thought, he suddenly recalled that there were some questions that he had about the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, as well as his recent, failed breakthrough. Seeing as he was able to physically transmigrate this time, was this not a perfect opportunity to make a trip to the True Mantra sect to visit Patriarch Myro? Senior Vile Spirit, would you be able to take me back to the True Mantra sect prior to its destruction? Han Li asked. Of course, but you'll have to expend even more time law threads in order to take the heaven-controlling vial with you, the Vile Spirit replied. I still need to sacrifice more law threads, Han Li asked with a pained expression. The loss of 30-time law threads was already a very steep price to pay, and he certainly didn't want to have to sacrifice any more. It depends on the time period that you wish to transmigrate to. The further away it is from the present, the more time law powers must be expended. If you wish to return to the True Mantra sect prior to its destruction, that's going to cost you at least 20 more time law threads, the Vile Spirit explained. After a brief hesitation, Han Li made up his mind and decided, all right, I'll go there. Hold on a second, the Vile Spirit said, and as soon as its voice trailed off, 20-time law threads split off from the golden ring on Han Li's finger, then disintegrated into a cloud of translucent dust that vanished into the heaven-controlling vial. Layers of green ripples began to emanate from the heaven-controlling vial, and it didn't take long before a particular ball of light came drifting toward Han Li from the river of time. This is the one you want, the Vile Spirit said, and Han Li immediately extended a tendril of spiritual sense toward the ball of light upon hearing this. However, before he was even able to catch a clear glimpse of the scene contained within the ball of light, it abruptly released a burst of tremendous suction force that drew him in the blink of an eye, and his vision instantly turned to black as his consciousness faded away. After an indeterminate period of time, Han Li's eyes sprang open, and he found himself standing in an unremarkable room. The room wasn't very large, and it only had 2 windows, while the furnishings were also quite bare and simple. There was a pine wood set of table and chairs situated near one of the windows, while the other half of the room was taken up by 3 beds with neatly folded blankets on top of them. Hanging on the wall directly across from the beds was a portrait of none other than Patriarch Myro. This seemed to be a room shared by several True Mantra sect disciples, and to Han Li's relief, there didn't appear to be any danger afoot. A golden ring that was riddled with over 1,600 time Tao runes was hovering above his head, and the heaven-controlling vial was hovering at its center. However, the Vile Spirit had disappeared, and the vial itself was also looking rather blurry, perhaps due to the impact of the golden ring. Han Li made his way out of the room to discover a small courtyard outside, and there appeared to be hundreds of similar courtyards nearby. These courtyards had all been constructed along a huge, white mountain, and standing beside these courtyards was a series of white jade palaces that stretched as far as the eyes could see. There were also some mountains hovering in midair that were laden with palaces as well. Having already come to this place once through spiritual transmigration, Han Li knew that this was the True Mantra sect. However, the last time that he was here, the sect was being attacked by the Heavenly Court, and it was already in a severely war-torn state, whereas at this point in time, it was still as pristine and tidy as ever. White-robed True Mantra sect disciples were flying through the sky above, and Han Li hurriedly concealed himself in order to avoid detection, then carefully released his spiritual sense to scour the surrounding area. Moments later, an elated look appeared on his face as he flew toward the summit of the giant, white mountain, while simultaneously channeling his myriad acupoint tranquility technique to conceal his own aura. Before long, he had already arrived in front of a two-story pavilion on the mountain summit, and beside the pavilion stood a stone plaque that read Merit Pavilion. There was barely anyone here, and an elderly man was seated at the entrance of the pavilion, seemingly acting as a supervisor of sorts. The man was a mid-high zenith cultivator, and upon Han Li's arrival, he seemed to have detected something as his eyes abruptly sprang open. However, a perplexed look then appeared on his face as he discovered that there was nothing to be seen. A faint smile appeared on Han Li's face as he pointed a finger at the elderly man, and several translucent chains shot out of his fingertip before racing toward the man's head. As soon as those chains left Han Li's body, he was immediately revealed, and the elderly man's expression changed drastically as he sprang to his feet while summoning a white badge in an attempt to activate the restrictions on the Merit Pavilion behind him. However, the translucent chains were far too fast, and they had already vanished into his glabella before he had a chance to react. The elderly man was instantly immobilized, locked in a strange, half-seated, half-standing posture. After immobilizing the elderly man, Han Li took a moment to inspect his surroundings, and only after verifying that no one had detected what he had just done did he allow himself an internal sigh of relief. He took a white badge from the elderly man, and after inspecting it momentarily with his spiritual sense, he immediately understood how it worked. He strode over to the Merit Pavilion, then swept the badge through the air, releasing a burst of white light that vanished into the doors of the pavilion. A translucent, white light barrier instantly appeared over the doors, with countless runes flashing over its surface. Han Li released another streak of white light using the badge, and this time, the runes on the light barrier quickly receded, following which the light barrier itself vanished as the doors of the pavilion slowly swung open. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he was just about to step inside the pavilion when he suddenly stopped in his tracks, then pointed a finger at the elderly man. 5 thin strands of black light shot out of his fingertip before vanishing into the elderly man's body, and his wooden expression instantly became much more natural as he sat back down again. This was a puppetry secret technique that he had learned from Taoist Zai during his time in the Sculpture spatial domain, and he was using it to control the elderly man to make him appear more natural so that he didn't draw any attention to himself. After that, Han Li made his way into the pavilion before closing the doors, and a white light barrier instantly reappeared over their surface. Han Li cast his gaze into the pavilion to discover that the first floor wasn't all that spacious, and it was filled with around 20 to 30 antiquated wooden bookshelves, all of which were laden with books, jade slips, and other types of scriptures that were clearly all cultivation arts and secret techniques. Just like the doors of the pavilion, these scriptures were also enshrouded in a white light barrier. Just as Han Li had guessed, this was the True Mantra Sect's scripture library. This was a rare opportunity to return to the True Mantra Sect, and he didn't want to squander it. His fate seemed to have been somehow intertwined with the True Mantra Sect, and he had frequently explored different avenues to learn more about the sect's history. The more he learned, the more astonished he became. Even though the True Mantra Sect was situated in the Black Soil Immortal region, which was not a very large immortal region, it was a sect of a very lofty status in the true immortal realm due to its expertise in the laws of time and, of course, Patriarch Miro. He had already expended 50 time law threads to get here. While it was true that he had come here in order to flee from Immortal Lord Miao Fa and Kai Meng, now that he was here, he fully intended to take full advantage of this opportunity. He had always been cultivating the laws of time on his own, and even though he was able to make rapid progress in the endeavor, there were many gaps in his knowledge that he wanted to fill, so he was eager to find some journals containing cultivation insights from some powerful true mantra sect cultivators. The laws of time were extremely difficult to comprehend and master, but they were also an integral part to the very fabric that this realm was woven from. Nothing could escape from the effects of time, and every single living being seemed to be able to come into contact with it, but was unable to truly grasp it. It was like a reflection in a pond of water, something that could only be seen, but not grasped. Hence, regardless of whether someone had made much progress in their cultivation of the laws of time, written records of their cultivation experiences and insights could perhaps be of some help to Han Li. With that in mind, he began to quickly make his way through the bookshelves, stopping occasionally to use the white badge in his hand to withdraw the restrictions around the bookshelves in order to access the scriptures inside. However, the more he read, the less enthused he became. The scriptures on these bookshelves were all quite profound, but they were all cultivation arts and secret techniques aimed at golden immortals and even true immortals. Some of them contained some cultivation insights, but all of those sections were very brief and vague, providing no benefit to Han Li. It looks like all of the scriptures here are of a rather lowly caliber. The higher grade scriptures must be kept somewhere more secretive. With that in mind, Han Li made his way up to the second floor of the pavilion. There were only around a dozen bookshelves on the second floor, and they were also laden with scriptures. Time was of the essence, so Han Li immediately began reading through the scriptures. The scriptures here were indeed of a higher level than the ones on the first floor, but not by much, and they weren't of much use to him. It didn't take long before Han Li read through all of these scriptures in futility, and he heaved a forlorn sigh before turning to depart. At this point, a good chunk of the time Dao runes on the golden ring had already been snuffed out, so he couldn't afford to waste any more time here. All of a sudden, he stopped in his tracks and cast his gaze toward a nearby bookshelf that was placed against a wall. He had only hurriedly examined the scriptures on the bookshelves earlier, so he had failed to notice that the positioning of this bookshelf was a little strange, in that it seemed to have been intentionally moved around a foot out of line with the other bookshelves. Han Li raised an eyebrow as he pushed the bookshelf back, then swept his spiritual sense over the surrounding area, upon which an elated look suddenly appeared on his face. He placed a hand against the section of the wall that had previously been blocked by the bookshelf, and a loud click rang out as the wall caved inward to reveal an opening, inside of which was a palm-sized, golden jade box. He was just about to open the box when a layer of golden light appeared over its surface to repel his hand. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, then reached out with both hands for the jade box, while a layer of golden light surfaced over each of his hands. The jade box released another layer of golden light to contend against the golden light emanating from Han Li's hands, but it was quickly overwhelmed and torn apart, following which the jade box sprang open to reveal a golden jade slip inside. Han Li picked up the jade slip before injecting his spiritual sense into it, to discover that it contained a secret technique called the Immortal Golden Cloud. According to the jade slip, this was a defensive secret technique that used time law powers as a foundation. On top of that, this wasn't just any defensive ability. Instead, it was proclaimed to be the true mantra sect's premium defensive secret technique. However, the prerequisites that had to be fulfilled in order to cultivate this ability were extremely stringent. Firstly, one had to possess tremendous time law powers and a very high understanding of the laws of time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to bear the overwhelming power of the immortal golden cloud, nor would they be able to comprehend the complexities of the secret technique. In addition to that, the cultivator had to possess at least 300 time law threads, and only then would they have sufficient time law powers to support the ability. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. The Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra was a time attribute cultivation art of the highest caliber, and he had already developed a very deep understanding of the laws of time. But the problem was naturally the requirement of 300 time law threads. At the moment, he only had around 150 time law threads left, which fulfilled only half of the minimum requirement. Even so, he was still very pleased to have found this secret technique. He stowed the jade slip and the golden box away, then returned the wall and the bookshelf to their original state so no one would notice that anything was amiss. After doing all of that, Han Li made his way downstairs, yet right as he was about to exit the pavilion, a streak of golden light came flying over from afar, then descended outside the Merit Pavilion to reveal an imposing man who was at the mid-high zenith stage. "Your Merit Pavilion is still as deserted as ever, fellow Taoist Jiang," the man chuckled. Han Li hurriedly channeled his puppetry secret technique to control the elderly man, who looked up at the visitor as he replied in an indifferent manner, "Barely anyone ever comes here anyway." The man didn't seem to have noticed anything amiss about the elderly man, and he lowered his voice as he said, "I don't mean to make a joke at your expense, fellow Taoist Jiang. Our sect is receiving more and more pressure from the heavenly court, and my heavenly star palace has also been largely deserted of late. It may be a rather wearisome task, overseeing these places for 10,000 years, but at the very least, we're in a much better situation than those elders who were sent on missions out of the sect. I've heard that many of them have already met their demise." To Han Li's relief, it appeared that the two of them were on good terms with each other, and under his control the elderly man asked, "Can I help you with something? I heard that our patriarch is going to be giving a lecture on the Sun View Peak, and I came here to invite you to attend the lecture with me." The man replied with a smile, and Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. There was a very good chance that this patriarch in question was Patriarch Myro, who was also a cultivator of the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra. There was no guarantee that he would specifically speak about the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra during his lecture, but the cultivation insights that he divulged had to be related to the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra, so this lecture was not to be missed. With that in mind, a hint of excitement welled up in his heart, and the elderly man replied at his behest, "Thank you for the kind offer, fellow Taoist Chen, but I still have some matters to attend to right now, so I'll have to go a little later." The man faltered slightly upon hearing this, then nodded in response. "In that case, I'll be going ahead on my own. You should also come as soon as you can, fellow Taoist Jiang. We may be using different cultivation arts from our patriarch, but I'm sure his cultivation insights will still be invaluable for us to hear." The man then promptly departed, flying away as a streak of golden light. The doors of the Merit Pavilion swung open, and Han Li emerged from within, then made a beckoning motion, upon which the elderly man stood up and made his way into the pavilion. He then flicked a finger through the air, sending a strand of translucent light flying into the elderly man's glabella, and he shuddered violently before falling to the ground in an unconscious state. Han Li tossed the white badge onto the floor beside the elderly man, then closed the doors of the pavilion behind him. The elderly man was going to be unconscious for at least 4 or 5 days, so he wouldn't be able to interfere with anything that Han Li did from here onward. From there, Han Li set off in the same direction that the man from earlier had departed in, and it didn't take long before he arrived near a lush mountain that was teeming with trees and riddled with strange-looking rocks. This was not an unfamiliar mountain to Han Li. Instead, he had already seen it 3 times, and the first of those occasions was when he first used the heaven-controlling vial to witness Patriarch Myro's lecture on the mountain summit. He had also been to this mountain during his time in the True Mantra sect ruins, and on this day, he found himself here once again. The mountain extended all the way up into the clouds, making it impossible to see its summit, and there was a long stone staircase leading all the way from the summit to the foot of the mountain. At this moment, the staircase was packed with seated true mantra sect disciples, all of whom were listening intently to the lecture, which had already commenced. Despite the fact that he was all the up on the mountain's summit, Patriarch Myro's voice was clearly audible to everyone, and every single syllable that he enunciated had a profound and ethereal quality to it. The nearby world's origin chi was trembling incessantly in the face of Patriarch Myro's voice, and at this moment, there were countless streaks of light flashing through the air, transforming into all types of phenomena, including gusts of fierce wind, vortexes of scorching fire, and storms of glacial ice. After observing these phenomena for a moment, Han Li began to fly his way up toward the mountain summit in secret. However, instead of flying all the way to the mountain summit, he sat down partway up the mountain for fear that Patriarch Myro would notice him if he were to get any closer. From here, he could already make out the scene on the mountain summit. Patriarch Myro was seated at the center, surrounded by his 5 disciples, and standing upright on its hind legs beside Mu Yan was a fat rat that was also looking at Patriarch Myro. Han Li was rather taken aback to see this, but he didn't pay much heed to it as he focused his attention on the lecture. As he listened, his expression gradually became more and more focused, until a look of utter enrapturement appeared on his face. At the moment, Patriarch Myro wasn't specifically talking about the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra, but Han Li could tell that every single word that he spoke was closely related to the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra. The cultivation art for the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra flowed through Han Li's mind as he cross-compared it with the lecture that was currently being delivered, and he was able to gain a deeper understanding of the cultivation art, striking him with a sense of enlightenment where there had previously been some confusion. Close to a day flew by in the blink of an eye. Right at this moment, Patriarch Myro's voice abruptly cut off, and Han Li was instantly snapped out of his enraptured state. He cast his gaze toward the mountain's summit to discover that Mu Yan had raised a question, and he couldn't help but feel envious of Mu Yan for having someone to answer his questions. After listening to Patriarch Myro's lecture, he had gained a much deeper understanding of the Great 5 Elemental Illusion Mantra, but some new questions pertaining to the cultivation art had also arisen in his mind. After answering Mu Yan's question, Patriarch Myro resumed his lecture, and Han Li hurriedly began listening again. Some time later, Patriarch Myro suddenly stopped once again as he cast a surprised gaze toward a certain spot in the air. His disciples were immediately snapped out of their enraptured state, and Mu Yan instantly sprang to his feet with a furious expression as he yelled, "Who's there?" A burst of invisible force surged out from between Patriarch Myro's lips to strike that spot in the air, and the space there was shattered, following which the invisible force seeped deep into the broken space, forming a passageway that led to some unknown destination. A faint crack then rang out from deep within the spatial passageway, as if something had been shattered. Han Li raised an eyebrow as he discovered that this was the scene where Patriarch Myro had caught him eavesdropping on his lecture all those years ago. Patriarch Myro swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of golden light, which swept over the shattered space to smooth it over again. "It's all right, there's no need to be alarmed," he said in a calm manner, and his disciples sat back down again. "Who was spying on us just now, Master? Was it someone from the heavenly court?" Chi Mozi asked with tightly furrowed brows. Patriarch Myro shook his head and offered no response, but he turned to take a glance at a spot partway up the mountain precisely where Han Li was seated. At the moment, Han Li had concealed himself using his myriad acupoint tranquility technique, and it was only a casual glance, but he knew that Patriarch Myro had already seen him. "Should I run?" Hanley thought to himself as he prepared to flee the scene, but Patriarch Myro had already withdrawn his gaze, paying no further heed to Hanley as he resumed his lecture once again. After a brief moment of hesitation, Hanley decided to remain where he was. He wasn't aware of Patriarch Myro's true power, but just that fleeting glance alone told him that Patriarch Myro was definitely far more powerful than even the likes of the Dark Heaven's devilish deity. So there was no way that he would be able to get away if Patriarch Myro wanted to capture him. Hence, he may as well stay and listen to the lecture. Furthermore, he was cultivating the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, which made him half a true mantra sect disciple. So even if Patriarch Myro were to capture him, he should have no intentions of harming him. With that in mind, Hanley felt much more reassured, and he sat down again to continue listening to the lecture. The lecture continued for another half a day, before Patriarch Myro declared its conclusion. All of the disciples of the true mantra sect bowed respectfully to him before departing, and before long, he was the only one left on the mountain summit. "You can come out now," Patriarch Myro said in a calm manner, and Hanley appeared behind him amid a burst of spatial fluctuations. "I pay my respects to Senior Myro," Hanley greeted as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. Patriarch Myro sized up Hanley for a moment, following which a warm smile appeared on his face as he murmured to himself, "Not bad at all. I came here by chance and was enraptured by your lecture, so I concealed myself to listen in secret. I hope you'll forgive me, Senior Myro," Hanley said as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. "It's fine. You've cultivated the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, and that makes you a disciple of my true mantra sect. So why can't you listen to my lecture?" Patriarch Myro asked with a benevolent smile. Hanley wasn't surprised that Patriarch Myro was able to identify the cultivation art that he was using, and he was quite relieved to see that Patriarch Myro didn't seem to harbor any enmity toward him. "You were the one spying on me earlier as well, weren't you? You may be here in the present, but you're not from the present. It's incredible to think that there's a treasure in this world capable of facilitating travel through space and time," Patriarch Myro mused. Hanley was stunned that Patriarch Myro was able to see through everything so easily, and he offered no response. The heaven-controlling vial was his biggest secret, so he naturally wasn't going to tell Patriarch Myro about it. Patriarch Myro seemed to have seen through his concerns, and he reassured, "Don't worry, I have no intention of taking your treasure. It's a very remarkable treasure that you have, so make sure to keep it safe." An awkward look appeared on Hanley's face upon hearing this, but thankfully, Patriarch Myro didn't dwell on the subject. A benevolent look appeared in his eyes as he asked, "What's your name?" "Hanley," Hanley replied after a brief hesitation. "Hanley, are you willing to become my disciple?" Patriarch Myro asked. Hanley was completely rooted to the spot by this sudden and unexpected turn that the conversation had taken. "I've always been very careful when it comes to taking disciples, and up to this point, I only have 6, but a wise and powerful man once prophesied that I'll have a total of 7 disciples in my lifetime, and that my final disciple will be the one to inherit my teachings. You are the only one in this world aside from myself to have successfully cultivated the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, so you must be this prophesied disciple," Patriarch Myro explained. A hesitant look appeared on Hanley's face upon hearing this. Patriarch Myro was undoubtedly an extremely powerful cultivator, and there was some connection between the two of them as well, but those factors on their own weren't enough to convince him to accept Patriarch Myro as his master. Patriarch Myro seemed to have gleaned his thoughts, and he smiled as he said, "You don't have to make a decision right away. How about I take you on a tour of our true mantra sect?" "I would be honored, Senior," Hanley replied with a nod. With that, Patriarch Myro swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of golden light that transformed into a wide, golden path, one that seemed to stretch on infinitely into the distance. He then beckoned for Han Li to step onto the path, and Han Li duly obliged. As soon as he set foot onto the golden path, a burst of peculiar time law powers instantly rose up from beneath his feet to envelop his entire body, and scenery around him instantly began to transform rapidly while revolving around him, as if he had just stepped into a space-time passageway. Before he had a chance to look closer at the transforming scenery, he found himself in a golden space, and he looked up into the sky with an astonished look on his face. Ever since he began integrating his true spirit bloodline with the heavenly baleful purgatory arts, his understanding of his true spirit bloodlines had become deeper and deeper over time. The heavenly phoenix bloodline was the first true spirit bloodline that he had ever attained, and thanks to his in-depth understanding of the bloodline, he had become far more sensitive to spatial power. Hence, he could sense that this golden space was already very far away from Sunview Peak, far beyond the maximal distance that could be traveled using his lightning teleportation formation. What was even more astonishing to him was that Patriarch Myro had been able to bring them here without producing any detectable spatial fluctuations. This is our true mantra sect's ubiquitous path ability, and it can be used to move space. However, it draws upon the power of time as opposed to spatial power, Patriarch Myro explained upon seeing Han Li's surprised expression, and he was even more stunned upon hearing this. All of the major cities and sects in the true immortal realm generally had spatial restrictions to prevent infiltration using spatial teleportation abilities, but if he could master this ability, then he would be able to easily bypass those restrictions. I didn't think that such an ability could be derived from time law powers, Han Li mused with an impressed expression. Our true mantra sect has been studying the laws of time for countless years, and during that time, countless time-derived abilities have been created, with the ubiquitous path being only one of them. If you're interested in such abilities, then come with me, Patriarch Myro said with a smile, then released a burst of golden light to sweep up Han Li before flying onward. Han Li allowed himself to be carried along by Patriarch Myro as he inspected the surrounding golden space. This seemed to be a secret area similar to the Tai Sui Immortal Manor, and there, the landscape down below was dotted with enormous buildings that were 10 times more imposing and majestic than all of the other buildings that Han Li had seen in the true mantra sect thus far. Many true mantra sect disciples were cultivating here, as if this were another true mantra sect. This is the true mantra profound domain, a domain that was created by my predecessors, and it's the true foundation of our true mantra sect, Patriarch Myro introduced with a hint of pride in his voice. Han Li nodded in response, and he began carefully inspecting the surrounding space once again, when a look of surprise suddenly appeared on his face. What he had failed to notice prior to this was that there was a burst of time law power fluctuations permeating throughout this entire space, just like in the Ian Pagoda. The difference was that the time law powers in the Ian Pagoda existed to weaken those who were imprisoned inside, while the time law power fluctuations here had no effect other than to accelerate the flow of time in this place. Time in this area passed roughly 50% faster than it did outside, and as he continued onward with Patriarch Myro, the flow of time only accelerated further and further. Before long, the flow of time had accelerated to 10 times the rate of the outside world, and the further Han Li advanced, the more astonished he became. Patriarch Myro was able to fly countless times faster than Han Li, and it didn't take long before he had covered tens of millions of kilometers. However, the golden space was so enormous that there was still no end in sight. After flying onward for a while longer, Patriarch Myro suddenly descended in front of a giant, golden mountain down below. The mountain reached all the way up into the clouds, obscuring half of the entire sky up ahead, as if it were a gargantuan, golden beast that was resting on its haunches. The entire mountain was giving off rays of golden light, and every single rock was giving off time law power fluctuations, which culminated into an all-encompassing wave that filled the entire area. Before Hanley even had a chance to find some stable footing, a burst of indescribable law power fluctuations immediately surged toward him, causing him to stumble back a few steps before steadying himself. He then cast an astonished gaze toward the golden mountain up ahead as he exclaimed, "Are those rocks all Zumi star rocks?" As a cultivator of the laws of time, he was well versed in all materials that contained time law powers, so he was able to determine that this mountain was entirely formed by a time attribute material called the Zumi star rock. Zumi star rocks were an extremely precious type of time attribute material that was said to arise in the boundless space beyond the true immortal realm, and just a small piece of the material could fetch a very high price, let alone an entire, giant mountain's worth. This golden Zumi mountain was secured from beyond the true immortal realm by the 11th master of the True Mantra sect, Taoist Master Tianxi, and it's the center of the true mantra profound domain, Patriarch Myro introduced. As expected of a sect that's able to contend with the heavenly court, Hanley praised in a heartfelt manner. At this point, the flow of time had already accelerated to hundreds of times faster than the outside world. Hanley couldn't help but wonder how the true mantra sect had been able to accomplish this. If he could replicate these conditions, then he would essentially have hundreds of times more time to cultivate than everyone else, and that was truly a very alluring prospect. "Come with me," Patriarch Myro said with a smile as he proceeded onward. There was only a single building in the area, namely a giant palace situated at the foot of the Golden Mountain. The palace was also entirely constructed from Zumi star rocks, and it was extremely resplendent and majestic, but there were no plaques or anything similar at the entrance, so it was unclear what was inside. The palace gates were tightly shut, and there was a Chinese letter symbol on each gate. Patriarch Myro strode over to the palace, and a layer of golden light appeared over the palms of his hands as he pressed them against the pair of Chinese letter symbols. The palace gates instantly began to glow with dazzling, golden radiance, and 4 golden deity projections emerged within it. The first deity was an imposing, square-faced man in a suit of golden armor, wielding a giant axe in one hand and a huge shield in the other. The second deity had a golden beak in the place of a mouth and 8 golden wings on their back. There was also a crystalline, golden crow on their head. What was most peculiar of all was that they had 3 legs. The third deity was an adorable and chubby little girl with a pair of short and stubby wings on her back and a bright halo above her head. She was holding a small, golden bow that was nocked with an arrow with a heart-shaped tip, as if it were a children's toy. The final deity was a beautiful woman with 6 arms that were holding a selection of musical instruments, namely a gyukin, a bayanjong, a vertical flute, a pipa, a bell, and a war drum, all of which were producing pleasant music. As soon as the 4 deities appeared, they immediately turned to Patriarch Myro with wary and forbidding looks on their faces. Patriarch Myro began to chant an incantation, and countless golden runes surged out of his mouth before fusing into the bodies of the 4 deities. Only then did the enmity in their eyes gradually recede, and they backed away to stand on either side of the gates, which slowly swung open. Patriarch Myro gestured for Hanley to come with him, then led the way into the palace, and Hanley duly obliged. Beyond the palace gates was a spacious hall that was thousands of feet in size. There were dense, golden patterns engraved onto the ground at the center of the hall, forming an extremely massive and complex formation. Bright, golden light and golden runes were emanating from all parts of the formation, but they were all restricted within the formation, with none of them escaping beyond the formation's boundaries. Two stone pillars were standing beside the formation, one white and one golden, and these two pillars had also been forged from Zumi star rocks. The golden pillar was inseparably connected to the ground and riddled with flame-shaped golden runes, while the white stone pillar was etched with silver runes, and there was a black hole that was flashing with black light above it. One immortal origin stone after another was flying out of the black hole, forming an endless stream that was constantly flowing into the golden formation, before disintegrating into balls of pure immortal spiritual power that fused into the formation. At the same time, bursts of fiery, golden light were also emanating from the golden stone pillar, injecting bursts of time law powers into the formation. With this continuous influx of immortal spiritual power and time law powers, the formation began to operate, and head-sized balls of golden light flew out from within, giving off bursts of formidable time law power fluctuations as they rose up into the air. Hovering above the golden formation was a golden plate that was riddled with complex patterns, and at its center was a thumb-sized bulge, protruding out of which was a golden needle. The balls of golden light surged into the plate, and the golden needle began to rapidly spin. Rings of golden light were emanating from the golden plate before vanishing into the nearby space, and Han Li's eyes widened slightly with astonishment at the sight before him. What he was astonished by was the discovery that this formation was the source of the accelerated flow of time in the entire true mantra profound domain. To put it more accurately, it was the golden plate above the formation. The other factor contributing to Han Li's astonishment was that this plate was the very same one that he had obtained from the true mantra sect ruins. As I'm sure you've already noticed, the flow of time in the true mantra profound domain is different from that of the outside world, and the reason for that is this heavenly wheel sundial. This sundial has the ability to alter the rate of flow of time, and it's the reason why our true mantra sect has been able to become as powerful as it is today, Patriarch Myro introduced. With this domain at the true mantra sect's disposal, its disciples could cultivate dozens, even hundreds of times faster than everyone else, so it was no wonder that the sect had become so powerful. This heavenly wheel sundial is truly an extraordinary treasure, but it seems like a huge amount of immortal origin stones and time law powers are required to support it. On top of that, this formation also appears to be quite remarkable, Han Li remarked. This formation is called the Celestial Time Formation, and it's one of the 10 most powerful ancient formations. Only with this formation can the heavenly wheel sundial be used. It's also true that a tremendous amount of resources is required to support the sundial's operation. The immortal origin stones aren't the problem, but the constant stream of time law powers is rather difficult to come by. Thankfully, this golden Zumi mountain contains near-boundless time law powers, so it's perfect for supporting the heavenly wheel sundial, Patriarch Myro explained. Han Li's heart sank slightly upon hearing this. Creating this domain had clearly been quite a difficult task even for the true mantra sect, so the chances of him being able to use the heavenly wheel sundial on his own were slim to none. One thing worth noting is that if the heavenly wheel sundial is made to alter the flow of time in a huge area like the entire true mantra profound domain, then it'll require an astronomical amount of resources to support it. But that requirement becomes much less if you only want to alter the flow of time in a small area, Patriarch Myro remarked in a meaningful manner, and Han Li's expression stiffened slightly upon hearing this. It felt to him like Patriarch Myro was telling him, because he already knew that the heavenly wheel sundial would fall into his hands someday. Come, there's more to be seen deeper in the palace, Patriarch Myro said as he led the way forward again, and Han Li followed along with slightly furrowed brows. After making their way around the formation in the hall, the two of them continued onward, passing through a long corridor to arrive at a crossroads with two paths ahead, one leading to the left and the other to the right. The path on the right was glowing brightly, while giving off bursts of formidable law auras that seemed to belong to powerful immortal treasures, many of which were of the time attribute. In contrast, the left path appeared far more unremarkable. On the right is our true mantra sect's treasure vault, where many immortal treasures are kept. Let's go to the scripture hall on the left first. That's where our sect's most precious cultivation arts and secret techniques are kept, Patriarch Myro explained, then led Han Li down the left path into a golden hall that was rectangular in shape. A series of grids had been dug into the walls on either side of the hall, and inside each grid was a book or a jade slip, but all of them were sealed behind golden light barriers. Next to each grid was a small plaque that displayed the name of the scripture inside. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of all of the time attribute secret techniques laid out around the hall. This true mantra palm seal allows one to cultivate time law powers into a palm projection that contains 9 circles, which are capable of storing different types of time law powers. The more you store, the more powerful the palm projection will be. If you can gather 9 types of time law powers, the palm projection will reach the peak of its powers and be capable of destroying virtually anything. This time destruction divine light is also an offensive ability that uses time law powers to manifest a ray of light capable of piercing through even space itself. The plaques next to the grids only displayed the names of the scriptures inside, so Patriarch Myro began describing all of the secret techniques to Han Li one by one. The more Han Li heard, the more stunned he became. All of the secret techniques here were profound beyond his imaginations, and there were hundreds of them in this hall. Han Li had even spotted the reversal true axis, the eye of truth, and the mantra domain, which he had already cultivated himself. I can see that you've already learned some of the abilities here, but you haven't made much progress in them at all, and that's a real pity. In particular, the reversal true axis and the mantra domain are abilities with immense potential that you haven't been able to tap into, Patriarch Myro suddenly remarked. Please enlighten men, Senior Myro, Han Li hurriedly implored. The reversal true axis is a very one-dimensional ability in that it only does one thing. I'm assuming that you're only able to enhance your own speed by about 12-fold at the very most, right? I can tell you now that those who truly master the reversal true axis can enhance their own speed by hundreds of times, even over 1,000-fold, Patriarch Myro said. Han Li couldn't help but gasp in astonishment upon hearing this. That's why the reversal true axis is our true mantra sect's most powerful auxiliary ability, despite its one-dimensional nature, Patriarch Myro continued. However, the ability asks a lot of one's physical constitution. I can tell that this is not a problem for you, given that you're already extremely advanced when it comes to physical cultivation, so it's a real pity that you've made so little progress in the reversal true axis. Han Li's heartbeat immediately began to accelerate with excitement, but at the same time, he was kicking himself for his own oversight. At some point, he had decided that he had already cultivated the reversal true axis to a sufficient degree, so he didn't allocate any more time to making further advancements. After that, he acquired the Great 5 Elemental Illusion mantra, and that took up almost all of his time and attention, so all of his other time attribute abilities were left untouched. As for the mantra domain, that's an ability that allows you to control the world around you through just your words. I used a hint of its power during my earlier lecture, and you saw what that amounted to. There are very stringent spiritual sense requirements for cultivating this ability, but once again, that is not a problem for you, so it's a massive waste that you're still stuck at the stage where you can only conjure up pure illusions in your mantra domain, Patriarch Myro continued. Han Li had spent a great deal of effort on hunting his mantra domain, so he felt a little indignant as he protested. But aren't illusions already quite useful on their own? The mantra domain is not just an illusory ability for fooling ordinary people. If you encounter someone well-versed in the laws of illusions, then your mantra domain will have no effect on them in its current form, so do not continue to stray down this wrong path, Patriarch Myro said in a stern manner. Despite the stern tone that had crept into Patriarch Myro's voice, Han Li remained receptive to his advice, as he could tell that Patriarch Myro was saying all of this for his benefit. At this point, he had already been made aware of the power and potential of the reversal true axis and the mantra domain, both of which were abilities that suited him very well. Given that he was going to have to dedicate a great deal of time and effort to hunting those two abilities, he was no longer as interested in seeing all of the other time attribute abilities in the hall. All of a sudden, Han Li stopped in his tracks and cast his gaze toward a particular grid, one that contained the scripture for the immortal golden cloud. This is our sect's most powerful defensive ability, but the prerequisites required to cultivate it are extremely stringent, so even though you've already obtained the cultivation method, I suggest you leave it for now, Patriarch Myro advised. You already know about that, Han Li asked with a surprised expression. Of course, I knew as soon as you appeared in the True Mantra sect. How can I oversee the True Mantra sect if I didn't have at least that level of competence? Patriarch Myro answered. Han Li felt a little embarrassed upon hearing this. He had thought that he had managed to remain hidden from Patriarch Myro this entire time, but as it turned out, nothing that he had done had managed to escape Patriarch Myro's notice. He then thought back to his plan to venture into the Nine Origins Temple, and he realized just how reckless and foolish that was. If the vile spirit hadn't saved him from Kai Meng and immortal Lord Miao Fa, he would have either already been dead by now or fallen into the hands of the Nine Origins Temple or the Heavenly Court, which was no better a fate than death. He had been advancing extremely quickly in his cultivation over the years, but the cultivation of his mental state hadn't been able to keep up, and that was what had resulted in such an irrational decision. With that in mind, Han Li gently exhaled, and all of the lingering arrogance and agitation in his heart was expelled in the wake of this wake-up call. He continued onward, examining the scriptures that he had passed by as he did so, and it didn't take long before he reached the very back of the hall. Next to the final grid was a plaque that read Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra, but the grid itself was completely empty. Not only that, but the other 5 branch cultivation arts, such as the Mantra Axis Scripture and the Time-Severing Flowing Fire Tome, were also missing. The Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra is the most prized cultivation art of our True Mantra sect, and it's only ever been passed down verbally, so there are no written versions, Patriarch Myro explained, and Han Li nodded with an enlightened expression. However, at the same time, he was also rather perplexed about why the other 5 time attribute cultivation arts had all been written into books and seemed to have been quite prevalent. Perhaps the scriptures of the sect had spread over time, following its destruction at the hands of the Heavenly Court. That's all of the cultivation arts and secret techniques. How about we go and take a look at the treasure vault? Patriarch Myro suggested with a smile. Han Li naturally raised no objections to this, and the two of them made their way into the neighboring treasure vault. The layout of the treasure vault was similar to that of the scripture hall. A series of grids had been dug into the walls, with each grid containing one or a set of immortal treasures. The difference was that there was a formation in each grid to nurture the immortal treasures inside. All of these immortal treasures were of an extremely high caliber, and even the worst ones were 6th-tier immortal treasures, while the best ones weren't inferior to the white bead that Han Li had secured for the Essence Fire Raven. However, following that brief period of self-reflection, Han Li's mental state had completely settled, and he remained unmoved by these treasures. There are some more remarkable places in our true mantra sect. Would you like to take a look at them as well? Patriarch Myro invited. There's no need for that. I can see that the true mantra sect is indeed more powerful than I had ever imagined, but I'm accustomed to doing things on my own, and I can't stay here for much longer anyway, so I'm afraid I'll have to turn down your kind offer of taking me as your disciple. Han Li replied as he cupped his fist in an apologetic salute. At this point, the number of remaining time Dao runes on the golden wheel above him would only be enough to allow him to remain in this time and space for about 2 more days. So even if he were to accept Patriarch Myro as his master, there wouldn't be much time for Patriarch Myro to instruct him. On top of that, the true mantra sect was still incomparable to the monolith that was the heavenly court. And while he would gain some benefits from accepting Patriarch Myro as his master, doing so would also throw him into the center of the conflict between the two almighty powers, so the benefits were simply outweighed by the drawbacks. Patriarch Myro remained calm and collected after hearing what Han Li had to say, as if he had already anticipated such a response. Instead of being incensed by Han Li's rejection, a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Looks like that wise man was correct in his evaluation. You are a very level-headed person, and you weren't swayed by everything that I showed you just now. I'm very happy to see that." Han Li raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. "At the moment, you still think that you can remove yourself from the conflict between our true mantra sect and the heavenly court, but that's only because you don't know enough about the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra. Anyone who cultivates the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, regardless of whether they join our true mantra sect or not, will inevitably be targeted and hunted by the heavenly court. On top of that, if I'm not mistaken, you should already be under some pressure from the heavenly court, right?" Patriarch Myro asked. "How can you tell?" Han Li asked as he raised an eyebrow. "I can sense the auras of the spirit refinement technique and a reincarnation palace mask inside you. On top of that, I can sense that this is no ordinary mask, so you must be a reincarnation disciple. That, in addition to the fact that you're cultivating the laws of time, tells me that the heavenly court will definitely not be looking favorably upon you," Patriarch Myro explained with a faint smile. "Your wisdom is truly unmatched, Senior," Han Li sighed with a resigned nod. "Hence, whether you join our true mantra sect or not won't affect the heavenly court's attitude toward you. In fact, the heavenly court is most likely already convinced that you're a disciple of our true mantra sect," Patriarch Myro continued, and Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon hearing this. "Given the predicament that you're already in, you may as well join our true mantra sect. You've done quite well in your cultivation of the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra thus far, but you've also made many mistakes. Right now, the 5 types of time law powers in your body are still relatively weak, so you won't be able to feel anything. But once those time law powers become stronger, problems will gradually begin to arise. When that time comes, you'll be torn apart and killed by the rampant time law powers in your body," Patriarch Myro warned. A grim look appeared on Han Li's face upon hearing this. Having just heard Patriarch Myro's lecture, he had gained a much deeper understanding of the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, and he could already sense that something wasn't quite right with the time law powers in his body. He couldn't put his finger on exactly what was amiss, but he could tell with certainty that Patriarch Myro was telling the truth. After a brief hesitation, Han Li arrived at a decision. "In that case, I'm willing to join the true mantra sect," he said as he prepared to kneel down and kowtow to Patriarch Myro to officially accept him as his master. Patriarch Myro was ecstatic to hear this, and he immediately raised a hand to release a burst of invisible force, holding up Han Li to prevent him from kneeling down. "You and I are not even from the same time period, so there's no need for such formalities. A surprised look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. Even though I'm taking you as my disciple, you are already a very formidable cultivator, and I'm sure you'll be able to reach the great encompassment stage soon. Hence, even though we're officially master and disciple, you can regard me as a friend to be treated on equal terms with yourself. Patriarch Myro continued with a smile, and Han Li was even more surprised to hear this. All of the sects in the True Mantra sect placed a great deal of importance in hierarchies of seniority, particularly when it came to master and disciple relationships. According to Han Li's knowledge, the True Mantra sect was an ancient sect that also held these values in very high regard, so it was very surprising to him that Patriarch Myro was completely disregarding all of that. Having said that, this suited him just fine. He had become accustomed to fending for himself over the course of his cultivation journey, so the idea of having to kneel and kowtow to someone was a rather awkward and unappealing one. That wouldn't be right. I've taken you as my master, so I should observe the formalities of a disciple, Han Li said in a respectful manner. Patriarch Myro didn't dwell on the subject, as he sat down onto the ground while gesturing for Han Li to do the same. After they had both taken a seat, a solemn look appeared on Patriarch Myro's face as he asked, Han Li, how is the True Mantra sect in your time period? Han Li hesitated momentarily, then replied, in my time period, the True Mantra sect had already been eradicated by the Heavenly Court long ago, and the Time Tao ancestor of the Heavenly Court personally brought about its fall. I see. Patriarch Myro replied in an unsurprised manner, as if he had already anticipated this. Master, I must warn you that Chi Mozi is not to be trusted. He will go on to betray the True Mantra sect and defect to Heavenly Court, almost single-handedly bringing about the sect's downfall in the process, so make sure to act swiftly against him, Han Li urged. Patriarch Myro's expression remained unchanged as he replied, if it is the will of the heavens, then there's no need to try and alter it. Otherwise, no one can tell what could be brought about. Han Li was just about to say something when Patriarch Myro raised a hand to stop him. Who's to say that our True Mantra sect won't be destroyed just because I stopped Chi Mozi's scheme? There's no need for us to discuss this matter any further. You just said that you won't be able to stay here for long, so in the remaining time that we have together, I want you to show me your great 5 elemental illusion mantra so I can determine the problems that you're facing. Han Li obliged to this request, speaking no further on the matter of Chi Mozi as he channeled his great 5 elemental illusion mantra. The mantra treasured axis, the time-severing torch, the clear time vial, the illusory dawn hourglass, and the eastern vicissitudes divine tree appeared around him one after another, then began to revolve around his body. He wanted to fully display everything to Patriarch Myro, so he was channeling his great 5 elemental illusion mantra with all his might, revealing all of the time Tao runes and time law threads on the 5 time attribute law treasures. The 50 time law threads that he had expended to come here had all come from the time-severing torch, so at the moment, there were only just over 100 time law threads left on it. There were around 30 time law threads around the mantra-treasured axis, while each of the other 3 remaining law treasures only had a few law threads around them. Patriarch Myro first gave a pleased nod upon seeing this, then immediately shook his head in disapproval. Han Li raised some questions pertaining to his cultivation to Patriarch Myro, then also told him about his failed Great Encompassment stage breakthrough before cupping his fist in a salute as he implored, "Please enlighten me, Master." The laws of time are one of the 3 paramount laws that transcend above all others, and nothing in this world can escape from its influence. As for the laws of the 5 elements, they form the foundation of all laws. The great 5 elemental illusion mantra is a cultivation art that uses the simplest reasoning of the five elements to divulge the secrets of the laws of time, Patriarch Myro said, while Han Li listened intently, latching onto his every word. The laws of the five elements are present in all other laws, as is the case with the laws of time. The five elements form an equilibrium in which they give rise to, but also conflict with one another, resulting in an eternal, unbroken cycle. That is the essence of the great five elemental illusion mantra. Regardless of how much time passes, the great five elemental illusion mantra continues to exist in a self-sustaining cycle, granting it immortality in the all-encompassing river of time, Patriarch Myro continued. Han Li was struck by a sense of enlightenment upon hearing this, as if a lamp had been ignited in his heart. He had always wondered why the laws of the five elements featured so prominently in the great five elemental illusion mantra when it was a time attribute cultivation art, and this answered that lingering question. Hence, the most important thing in cultivating the great five elemental illusion mantra is balance. The five elements can only coexist in harmony when all is balanced. Otherwise, catastrophic outcomes will arise. Right now, everything in your cultivation is extremely unbalanced. Your time-severing fire domain has a huge number of time law threads, far outnumbering those of your clear time vial, illusory Dawn-Sand domain, and Eastern vicissitudes divine tree. With such a severe imbalance present, how could you possibly have succeeded in your breakthrough to the great encompassment stage? Patriarch Myro explained. See, the problem is that it's not so easy to increase the number of law threads on my clear time vial, illusory dawn hourglass, and Eastern vicissitudes divine tree. Things that contain time law powers are difficult to find to begin with, and it'll make it even more difficult if I have to find treasures that contain similar time law powers to my clear time vial, illusory dawn hourglass, and Eastern vicissitudes divine tree. Do you know any other way to attain time law threads, Master? Han Li asked. The great five elemental illusion mantra grants you the extraordinary ability to refine the time law powers in external items into time law threads. In contrast, all other cultivators of the laws of time can only slowly and arduously attain time law threads by deepening their understanding of the laws of time and advancing in their cultivation base. You are able to progress countless times faster than them, yet it seems like you're still not satisfied, Patriarch Myro scolded in a stern manner. I understand that I'm asking for a lot, but in my time period, the heavenly court is constantly hot on my tail, so I can't afford to make slow and steady progress. Given that our true mantra sect is so powerful, would it be possible for me to have a few materials that contain time law powers that I can refine into law threads? Han Li asked with a smile. So that's what you had in mind, Patriarch Myro chuckled. Of course I have the materials that you seek, but I'm assuming there are many restrictions to this type of space-time transmigration, so you may not be able to take them back with you. Han Li faltered slightly upon hearing, clearly having failed to consider this problem. In any case, it can't hurt to try, Patriarch Myro said as he swept a sleeve through the air to summon 3 items, namely a length of green wood, a broken, blue halberd, and an earthy, yellow stone. All 3 items were giving off formidable time law power fluctuations that weren't inferior in the slightest, compared with the Fire Age fireflies' nests. Thank you, Master. Even though there was a chance that these items wouldn't be able to make it back to his time period with him, Han Li was still very happy to have had them bestowed upon him. The path of cultivation must be one that's walked one step at a time. At the moment, the time law powers in your body are very unsettled, and that's an indication that you've been progressing too quickly, so you must take the time to remedy this problem, Patriarch Myro cautioned. Yes, Master, Han Li replied with a serious nod. Also, I have another question pertaining to spirit domains. It's already been many years since I first attained my spirit domain, but up to this point, It's still in its most elementary form, and I haven't been able to reach the creation tier or the spirit form tier. Why is this? As one of the three paramount laws, the laws of time are extremely powerful, but the heavenly Tao is balanced in that it's far more difficult to progress in one's mastery of the laws of time than it is for other laws, and the same applies to the cultivation of your spirit domain. I'm afraid this is not something that I can help you with. The only way to advance your spirit domain is to deepen your understanding of the laws of time, Patriarch Myro replied. Hanli nodded in response, then raised some other questions, some pertaining to the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, some to immortal treasures, and some about other facets of cultivation. Not only did Patriarch Myro possess an unfathomable cultivation base, he also seemed to possess a boundless understanding of laws, immortal treasures, and all other aspects of cultivation, allowing him to answer all of Han Li's questions and provide him with frequent bouts of enlightenment. Before long, almost all of the time Tao runes on the golden wheel had faded away. Even though Han Li had only spent a short time with Patriarch Myro, his understanding of the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, the laws of time, and the overall concept of cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. The two of them remained seated across each other in the hall, and Han Li didn't raise any further questions. Patriarch Myro seemed to be able to sense that Han Li was about to leave, and he didn't say anything either. Thank you for your guidance, Master. I have benefited immensely from our time together, Han Li said as he extended a respectful bow. As your master, it's only right that I instruct you in your cultivation. If anything, I feel quite inadequate in only being able to provide you with such limited guidance. Having said that, seeing as you possess the ability to transmigrate through space and time, you should be able to return here in the future. There are still many things that I have yet to teach you about the cultivation of the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, Patriarch Myro sighed. I would also love to return here to receive more instruction from you, but I still haven't completely mastered this form of space-time transmigration, and I have to pay quite a heavy price per transmigration, so I may not be able to return to this place, Han Li replied with a wry smile. Is that so? Patriarch Myro mused as he raised an eyebrow. In that case, take this with you. This contains the insights that I've made from cultivating the laws of time. He flipped a hand over to produce a jade book as he spoke, then handed it to Han Li, who gleefully accepted the offering. Thank you, Master. It would naturally be ideal if you could successfully take those things back with you, but if you're unable to, then make sure to pay a visit to a place called the Yama Manor when you return to your time period, Patriarch Myro instructed. The Yama Manor, where's that and why do I need to go there? Han Li asked. You'll know when the time comes, Patriarch Myro replied with a faint smile. Han Li was rather perplexed by Patriarch Myro's enigmatic words and actions, but he didn't give it too much thought. Master, I have another request for you. Would it be possible for you to give me a diagram for the celestial time formation outside? Han Li requested. Of course. The formation diagram isn't all that complex, so you should be able to memorize it now, Patriarch Myro replied as he handed a jade slip to Han Li. Han Li took the jade slip, then injected his spiritual sense into it and began quickly memorizing its contents. Just as Patriarch Myro had said, the formation diagram wasn't very complex, and he was able to memorize it quite quickly. Right at this moment, the final time Tao rune on the golden ring above his head finally faded, and the ring abruptly swelled to several times its original size, forming a black vortex above Han Li. A burst of tremendous suction force surged out of the vortex, sucking him into it. Patriarch Myro rose to his feet as he warned. Han Li, the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, is an extraordinary cultivation art capable of allowing one to alter heaven and earth. Even the Time Tao ancestor has always wanted to obtain it, and many other Tao ancestors have been searching for it as well, so make sure to proceed with the utmost caution. Before Patriarch Myro had a chance to finish, Han Li was swallowed up by the black vortex and promptly lost consciousness. Ali. After an indeterminate period of time, a burst of radiant white light appeared before Han Li, and he descended back onto some firm ground, while the heaven-controlling vial fell into his lap. After taking a moment to steady himself, Han Li looked around to discover that his vision was still rather blurry, and that all of the surrounding scenery was rather shadowy and indistinct. He immediately sat down and closed his eyes for a while, and only after his spiritual sense had completely settled did he reopen his eyes. In doing so, he discovered that he was seated atop a protruding cliff, and all he could see around him was the clear, blue sky, as well as clouds of different shapes and sizes. He hurriedly cast his gaze toward his right hand, which was still holding the formation diagram for the celestial time formation, but the jade slip had been enveloped in a burst of strange power, and it was rapidly fading into non-existence. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and he hurriedly pulled out the 3 time attribute materials given to him by Patriarch Myro and the copy of the Immortal Golden Cloud. But those things also faded away without a trace in a span of mere seconds. Han Li wasn't overly surprised to see this. After all, Patriarch Myro had already warned him of this possibility. In any case, he had already reaped immense benefits from this trip back to the true mantra sect, so he wasn't all that disappointed. However, now that these things were gone, he would have to travel to the Yama Manor that Patriarch Myro had mentioned. He had never even heard of this place before, so there was most likely going to be a long search ahead, and that was something that he would just have to think about another time. Right at this moment, the vile spirit's voice suddenly rang out. It's very impressive that you were able to regain your bearings so quickly after such a prolonged stint of physical transmigration, without the heaven-controlling vial acting as a space-time anchor for your return. Thank you for saving me, Senior Vile Spirit, Han Li hurriedly said as he pulled out the heaven-controlling vial. There's no need to thank me. I'm going to have to hibernate for a while to rest, so you'll have to fend for yourself for now. Make sure you don't end up dead, the vile spirit grumbled. Do you know where we are right now, Senior Vile Spirit? Han Li asked. I'm sure you can already tell from the world's origin chi here that we're in the primordial land. As for exactly where we are, I have no idea. The primordial land is so vast that it may well be larger than all of the 3,000 known immortal regions combined, and there are countless true spirits and other powerful creatures dwelling inside. So that's why I was telling you to take care not to end up dead. The vile spirit's voice became quieter and quieter as it spoke, until it faded altogether, and the pair of beady, little eyes on the vial also disappeared. Han Li could only tuck the vial back down the front of his robe as he rose to his feet. He strode over to the edge of the cliff, then looked down to discover that the landscape was smothered under a blanket of yellow sand that stretched as far as the eyes could see, with only some hills, patches of reddish-brown deserts, and spruces of sparse vegetation punctuating the monotonous expanse of yellow sand. For now, I'll just have to find a safe place to go into seclusion for a while, Han Li thought to himself, then rose up into the air and flew away as a streak of azure light. Ali. After flying through the boundless, yellow desert for over a month, Han Li finally arrived at a lush oasis. Along the way, he was attacked by many sand beasts, but none of them posed any meaningful threat to him. He descended onto a hill on the edge of the oasis with the intention of taking a rest before he continued on his journey. Yet he had only just sat down when he suddenly cast his gaze in a certain direction with slightly furrowed brows. He could sense bursts of fiercely clashing energy fluctuations there, and after a brief hesitation, he concealed his own aura before setting off in that direction. As he drew closer to the scene, he began to hear what sounded like choruses of animalistic roars, and after flying over a tall ridge, he was greeted by the chaotic sight of two primordial tribes locked in a fierce battle. One of the tribes was comprised of creatures with black, humanoid bodies coupled with rhinoceros heads. There were tens of thousands of them, all of whom stood at over 30 feet tall, and each of them was wielding a giant stone axe. The eyes of all of these humanoid rhinoceros creatures were glowing bright red, as if they were in a berserk state, and they didn't seem to be able to feel any pain, nor did they appear to have any regard for their own safety. The other tribe outnumbered the humanoid rhinoceros beings, but they were far smaller in stature. They were quite similar in appearance to normal big cats, such as tigers and leopards, but their bodies were riddled with cloud-shaped spots. None of them were carrying any weapons, and they relied solely on their extremely sharp bone claws to inflict damage upon their enemies. The humanoid rhinoceros beings were extremely strong and sturdy, while their feline opponents moved as swiftly as the wind, so they were quite evenly matched, and that made for a horrific battle where both sides had already suffered extensive casualties. Han Li was standing atop the ridge, observing the battlefield from afar, and he noticed that there was a vacant area at the center of the battlefield that the combatants from both tribes seemed to have been actively avoiding. At the center of this area was a giant, humanoid rhinoceros being that was close to 100 feet tall, and he was locked in battle against a muscular, feline creature. Unlike their brethren, the two of them both possessed some powerful abilities in addition to their physical attacks, and it was clear that these were the leaders of the two tribes. As he was observing the battle, the leader of the feline creatures suddenly seemed to have caught a whiff of Han Li, and he immediately turned to the ridge as he roared, "I smell the stench of a human." The giant rhinoceros being immediately stopped what he was doing and turned his attention to the ridge as well upon hearing this. Han Li knew that he had been caught, and he could only heave a resigned sigh. "I'm only just passing through." However, the primordial beings weren't interested in hearing his excuses, and under the orders of their leaders, both parties disengaged themselves from the battle before retreating to open up some distance between themselves. "There's a human over there. Kill him," the two tribal leaders ordered in unison, and the two tribes that had been fiercely clashing just a moment ago immediately joined forces against a common enemy, charging toward the ridge in a collective fury. Han Li immediately turned to depart upon seeing this, not wanting to get involved in this mess. But it then occurred to him that he still didn't know where he currently was, so it would be a good idea to find out from these primordial beings. With that in mind, he sprang up into the air, then plummeted like a meteorite toward the pair of tribal leaders. The giant rhinoceros being instantly lashed out upward with his huge axe, releasing countless crimson axe projections that swept toward Han Li in a frenzy. Meanwhile, the feline creature sprang up into the air to meet Han Li, and with each stride that it took, a yellow cloud would appear beneath its paw, providing a staircase leading up to the heavens. Even though they seemed to be sworn enemies, they worked together very well, and if Han Li were to be forced back by the storm of axe projections, then that would give the feline creature an opportunity to pounce on him. In the face of the storm of axe projections, Han Li displayed no intention of backing down. Instead, he accelerated even further as he charged straight into the fray. Contrary to everyone's expectations, he wasn't immediately torn to shreds. Instead, he was able to force his way through all of the axe projections with his physical body alone before descending upon the giant rhinoceros being. The rhinoceros being was rather taken aback by Han Li's formidable physical constitution, but he could sense that Han Li's aura wasn't particularly powerful, so he charged forward with his axe raised in a fearless manner. Han Li stomped a foot down onto the sharp edge of the giant axe, and a resounding boom instantly rang out as the axe exploded into pieces. The rhinoceros being's arms shuddered violently from the impact, and a numb sensation instantly spread through his entire body as his legs gave out from under him, forcing him to his knees. Taking advantage of the force of the impact, Hanley sprang up into the air again to evade a sneak attack from the feline being, and right as his assailant was passing him by, he grabbed onto the back of his neck, then gave it a gentle squeeze, and the feline being immediately lost the ability to resist. He carried the limp and powerless feline being by the scruff of the neck as he crashed down onto the rhinoceros being's shoulder, forcing him to bow his head to the ground. All of this had taken place in the blink of an eye, and most of the primordial beings from the two tribes didn't even get a chance to catch a clear glimpse of what had happened before they discovered that their leaders had been subdued by Hanley. All of them came rushing back from the ridge to surround Hanley, while yelling demands for him to release their leaders. Hanley paid no heed to them as he hoisted up the feline being's body with one arm so that their faces were level with each other, and he asked, "What are your two tribes called, and why are you fighting here?" The powerless feline being merely took a resentful glance at Hanley and offered no response. "I'm sure you know what a soul search technique is, right? Don't force me to use it or you're going to regret it," Hanley threatened in a cold voice. The feline being shuddered slightly, but remained silent. Hanley gave a cold harumph as he raised a finger before extending it toward the feline being's forehead, and a translucent thread shot out of his fingertip before making its way toward the feline being's glabella. To Hanley's surprise, the rhinoceros being beneath his feet suddenly answered his question in the feline being's stead. "We are the silver-horn rhinoceros tribe, and they are the cloud-spot tiger tribe. We are fighting here because our two tribes have been sworn enemies for generations." Hanley raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, and it immediately occurred to him that this was a rather strange turn of events. "If you're sworn enemies, then why are you speaking up for him? It looks like you don't want me to search his soul, so that must mean that you're trying to hide something from me," Hanley deduced with a cold smile. A look of alarm and frustration appeared on the rhinoceros being's face upon hearing this, and he was internally cursing humans for their cunning ways. Hanley didn't hesitate any longer as he pressed his finger against the cloud-spot tiger being's glabella, and the translucent thread extending out of his fingertip instantly pierced into the latter's head. The rhinoceros being immediately let loose a thunderous roar, and all of the surrounding primordial beings from the two tribes instantly converged toward Hanley, paying no heed to the safety of their two leaders. Hanley swept a sleeve through the air to release a burst of azure light, which contained 36 azure bamboo cloudswarm swords, and they transformed into 36 pillars of golden lightning that formed a circle around him with a diameter of several thousand feet. Huge balls of golden lightning erupted out of the pillars of lightning amid rumbling thunderclaps and loud, electric buzzing. Primordial beings had an innate fear of lightning and fire, and none of them dared to venture into the wall of golden lightning that Hanley had erected. Hanley took advantage of this opportunity to quickly search through the cloud-spot tiger being's soul, and a short while later, he withdrew his finger as a rather peculiar look appeared on his face. From the cloud-spot tiger being's memories, Hanley had learned the true reason behind why this conflict had erupted between the two tribes. The silver-horn rhinoceros being was telling the truth in that the two tribes really had been sworn enemies for generations, and had already been in conflict for millions of years. But that wasn't the sole instigating factor for this conflict. As it turned out, 30 years ago, the ruler of all of the primordial tribes, the true Spirit King, had suddenly declared that a blood inheritance ceremony was going to be held in the holy primordial palace on Eight Plains Mountain, and all tribes that still possessed the 8 ancient regal bloodlines had been summoned to Eight Plains Mountain. The 8 regal bloodlines belonged to the 8 true spirit kings who ruled over the primordial land in ancient times. But at some point, 8 true spirit kings had parted ways, leaving only a single one behind. The descendants of the other true spirit kings were littered throughout the primordial land, and those that possessed purer regal bloodlines remained powerful forces to be reckoned with, while those with less pure bloodlines were often less fortunate, with some of them even going extinct entirely. This blood inheritance ceremony was once the most important event in the primordial land, but it had already been tens of millions of years since the last one was held due to the incomplete nature of the 8 regal bloodlines. As soon as it became known that the ceremony was going to be held again, the entire primordial land was stirred up into a frenzy. All of the primordial tribes viewed it as a great honor to be able to attend the ceremony, and the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe and the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe were no exception. However, their 2 tribes didn't even have a single inkling of any of the 8 regal bloodlines, and they didn't even rank among the top 100 most powerful primordial tribes, either, so they naturally had no right to take part in the ceremony. Initially, their 2 tribes had no intention of attending the ceremony as they would only be embarrassing themselves. But some silver horn rhinoceros beings had recently discovered an adolescent beast on their territory, one that possessed one of the 8 regal bloodlines. The adolescent beast was in a state of slumber, seemingly having sustained severe injuries, and it was currently under the protection of the silver horn rhinoceros tribe. However, right as the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe was planning in secret to deliver the adolescent beast to 8 Plains Mountain, news of their plan was somehow leaked to the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe. The latter naturally didn't want to see the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe's plan succeed. After all, if they were to successfully deliver the adolescent beast to 8 Plains Mountain, they would most likely receive a handsome reward that could elevate their power and status beyond that of the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe. With that in mind, the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe had attacked the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe to try and claim the adolescent beast for themselves. Han Li released the Cloud Spot Tiger being, and the latter slumped to the ground in an unconscious state. "Where is this adolescent beast right now?" Han Li asked as he looked down at the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being. The latter offered no response, but a strange gleam had appeared in his eyes. Han Li hurriedly pressed a hand down onto the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being's head as he harumphed. "I commend you for your bravery, but you're not going to detonate your own soul under my watch. You won't get any information out of me," the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being roared. A burst of translucent light emerged from the palm of Han Li's hand as he used his spirit refinement technique to protect the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being's consciousness, thereby preventing him from detonating it. "You have tens of thousands of brethren, so even if you detonate your own soul, I'll still be able to find that adolescent beast just fine, do you understand? I don't want to have to kill you, so don't go throwing your own life away for no good cause," Han Li said in a cold voice. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being calmed down a little upon hearing this, but he then immediately objected. "You humans are not to be trusted. Just kill me. It's up to you whether you trust me or not, but I can tell you that I bear no ill will toward that adolescent beast. I have some questions for you, and I'll let you go once you've answered them," Han Li said. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being was slightly swayed upon hearing this, given that Han Li had refrained from killing the Cloud Spot Tiger being, and also prevented his own self-detonation. Han Li could see that the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being was coming around a little, and he asked, "Which area of the primordial land are we in right now?" The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being was clearly rather taken aback by this question, and it took a moment for him to reply. "We are a subsidiary tribe to the Earth Dragon tribe, and we are on the southwestern outskirts of the Earth Dragon tribe's territory." Han Li was rather flabbergasted to hear this. What kind of answer was this? After some contemplation, he adopted a different line of questioning. How are areas in the primordial land distinguished from one another? And where is this area of the primordial land relative to the nearby immortal regions? Our primordial land has always been split up into territories ruled over by major tribes, such as the territory of the nine-tailed heavenly fox tribe, or the territory of the bright regal peacock tribe. Relative to the nearest immortal regions, the Earth Dragon tribe's territory is somewhere between the Golden Origin Immortal region and the Spirit Platform Immortal region, the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being replied. The Spirit Platform Immortal region is right next to the Greater Golden Origin Immortal region. Somehow, he had ended up near the Greater Golden Origin Immortal region once again. Han Li suppressed this thought as soon as it surfaced in his mind. After being pursued by Kai Meng and Immortal Lord Miao Fa, he had come to realize just how massive a disparity in power there was between him and mid-great encompassment cultivators, and he knew that venturing into the Greater Golden Origin Immortal region to search for Jin Tong would be a complete suicide mission. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being could see that Han Li was a little distracted by his thoughts, and he attempted to move ever so slightly. Han Li immediately snapped back to his senses before stomping down with mountainous force, causing the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being to sink even further into the ground. I did say that I won't kill you, but that doesn't mean that you should test me, Han Li warned. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being shuddered before falling still, not daring to move again. Which one of the 8 regal bloodlines does that adolescent beast possess? Han Li asked. I don't know, the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being replied. Looks like searching your soul will be more convenient after all, Han Li harumphed as he raised an eyebrow. I'm telling the truth. At the moment, the adolescent beast is in a strange state where it looks like it's been encased in a rock, and it's not giving off any aura fluctuations at all, so I can't tell what it's supposed to be, the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being explained. In that case, how do you know that it possesses a regal bloodline? Han Li asked. Beings that possess regal bloodlines are naturally able to exert dominance over other primordial beings and evoke an urge to pledge subordination. You're a human, so you won't know about that, the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being explained. As it turned out, Han Li actually was rather familiar with this concept. It was just like how his heavenly phoenix bloodline allowed him to naturally subjugate many species of avian demon beasts. Take me to the adolescent beast, Han Li ordered. The 8 regal bloodlines were most certainly all very powerful bloodlines. At the moment, Han Li was still missing 2 types of true spirit bloodlines in his 12 awakening transformations, and if he could obtain one of those bloodlines from the adolescent beast, then that would certainly be very welcome news. You said you would release me once I answered your questions, yet you're blatantly going back on your word now. I knew you humans can't be trusted. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being yelled in a furious voice. Who told you that I'm a human? Han Li asked. You're not a human. That's impossible, the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being denied with a shake of his huge head. Han Li offered no response, choosing to let his actions do the talking as he channeled his true spirit bloodlines and transformed into a giant lightning bird. At the same time, he withdrew all of his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords back into his body, revealing his lightning bird form to all of the surrounding Silver Horn Rhinoceros beings and Cloud Spot Tiger beings. Han Li knew that there was no way that the Silver Horn Rhinoceros being would be willing to take a human to see the adolescent beast, and he didn't want to have to wipe out these 2 tribes either, so he had to resort to trickery. All of the primordial beings present were instantly rooted to the spot upon sensing the true spirit aura emanating from Han Li's body. You, what? How is this possible? The Silver Horn Rhinoceros being stammered in disbelief. I bear no ill will toward the adolescent beast, You say that it's currently in a strange state of slumber, right? Perhaps I can even help it, the lightning bird declared in a thunderous voice, then spread its wings and soared into the heavens. Without Hanli weighing him down, the silver-horned rhinoceros being was able to clamber to his feet, and after a prolonged period of contemplation he acquiesced. "All right, I'll take you to see it." After that, Hanli woke up the unconscious leader of the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe, and following a brief conversation, he learned that the silver-horned rhinoceros being's name was Sang Tu, while the Cloud Spot Tiger being's name was Yun Bao. Thus, what was supposed to have been a battle to the death reached a premature conclusion thanks to Han Li's intervention. Shortly thereafter, all of the primordial beings had returned to their respective tribes, leaving only 7 or 8 people behind to accompany Sang Tu and Han Li to the place where the adolescent beast was being kept. Before long, the group arrived at a small mountain, where Sang Tu led Han Li to a semi-concealed cave entrance. As soon as Han Li reached the cave entrance, he was immediately struck by an aggressive wave of heat alongside a strong, sulfurous odor. "It's in there," Han Li asked with slightly furrowed brows. At the same time, he swept his spiritual sense through the interior of the cave, but didn't discover any special auras inside. "Inside this cave is a lava lake, and my tribesmen often enter the cave to collect materials to forge our axes. Normally, we wouldn't enter the deepest part of the cave, but one of our tribesmen inadvertently fell in, and that was how the adolescent beast was discovered," Sang Tu explained. "All right, lead the way," Han Li instructed, and Sang Tu nodded in response before making his way into the cave entrance. Now that the battle was over, Sang Tu had reverted back to his normal form, which was only around 10 feet in height and far less imposing than the form that he had displayed on the battlefield. As it turned out, not only did the silver-horned rhinoceros beings adopt an alternate physical form in battle, the same applied to the Cloud Spot Tiger beings as well. In their normal form, all of them walked in a bipedal, upright fashion, and much of the stripes on their heads had faded away, making them far less animalistic in appearance. Han Li followed Sang Tu into the cave, and he discovered that the interior of the cave was very spacious. On top of that, the walls and the ceiling above had all been chiseled smooth. There was a path in the cave that was over 10,000 feet in length and gradually sloped downward, and at its conclusion, the path tapered to a round hole that was roughly 70 to 80 feet in size. Beyond the hole was another cave that was illuminated by fiery, red light, and that was the source of the intense heat and sulfurous odor. "That's where we discovered the adolescent beast," Sang Tu said as he pointed into the round hole. "Take me inside," Han Li replied with a nod, and Sang Tu did as he was told, leading the way into the cave. Han Li followed him inside, and he was greeted by the sight of a giant, underground lava lake. The lava in the lake wasn't flowing. Instead, there were huge slabs of hardened black rock over its surface that were formed by cooled and solidified lava. Bright, red light could be seen shining through the gaps between the slabs of rock, and that was coming from the still molten lava below. Han Li swept his gaze over the surface of the lake, and he quickly spotted what appeared to be a black rock hovering above the center of the lake. It resembled a black dog that was curled up into a ball, and he immediately flew toward it with an intrigued expression. As he arrived at the rock and was able to take a closer look, a peculiar feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. Meanwhile, Sang Tu and the others had all involuntarily lowered their heads in a submissive manner, and it was clear that this dog-shaped black rock was the adolescent beast that Sang Tu had spoken of. Han Li took a glance at them, then returned his gaze to the rock, and the more he inspected it, the more pronounced the look of befuddlement in his eyes became. "Something's not right," Sang Tu said in a puzzled manner as he arrived by Han Li's side. "The last time I was here, the lake was still very active, and there wasn't anywhere near as much black stone on the surface. Was this adolescent beast always this color? Hanley asked. It was black when we first found it, but I distinctly recall that its coloration definitely wasn't as dark as it is now, Sang Tu replied in a confident manner. Hanley reached down to gently stroke the creature, and he immediately felt a cool sensation on his fingertips. It seems like this beast was severely wounded by an ice attribute attack, and it had no choice but to completely seal itself away in order to save its own life. Right now, it's using the heat of the lava lake to help ward off its injuries, Hanley explained. So that's why so much of the lake's surface has cooled and solidified, Sang Tu mused with an enlightened expression. All right, I'll be taking it back with me now, Hanley declared. I can't let you do that, Yun Bao objected as he stepped into Hanley's path. Hanley cast his gaze toward Yun Bao, and a hint of fear immediately flashed through the latter's eyes, but he stood his ground as he said, if it's staying here to ward off its injuries, then won't we be endangering it by taking it away from here? Your concerns are not unwarranted, but rest assured, I have a way to save him, Hanley replied with a nod, then spread a hand open, and a bright, silver flame appeared over the palm of his hand, giving off incredible heat that was hundreds of times more potent than that of the lava lake. Sang Tu, and the others all reflexively sprang back in retreat in the face of the unbearable heat. Can I take it with me now? Hanley asked. My apologies, I shouldn't have doubted you, Yun Bao conceded in an apologetic manner. All right, let's take it back to the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe, Hanley decided, and Sang Tu was ecstatic to hear this, while a concerned look appeared in Yun Bao's eyes. Hanley had noticed both of their reactions, but he didn't say anything. Shortly thereafter, the group departed from the cave. Ali. The Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe's territory was situated on the bank of a large river, and it consisted of clusters of tall, tent-like buildings constructed from rocks, beast hide, and wood, presenting a stunning sight to behold. Upon the return of Sang Tu, all of the Silver Horn Rhinoceros beings emerged from their tents to greet their leader, only to involuntarily bow their heads in the face of the bloodline pressure that they felt from the adolescent beast. However, fierce killing intent then surfaced in their eyes at the sight of Yun Bao and his subordinates, and the situation could have easily spiraled out of control had Sang Tu not stepped forward to keep his tribesmen in check. Sang Tu led everyone to his tent, and the adolescent creature was set down onto his beast hide bed. With a sweep of his sleeve, Hanley released the Essence Fire Child, and as soon as it appeared, the temperature in the tent instantly spiked drastically, forcing Sang Tu and the others to back out of the tent in discomfort. A hint of guilt welled up in Han Li's heart at the sight of the 5 remaining colored flames on the Essence Fire Child's head. The Essence Fire Raven had expended 2 of its 7 Rainbow Fire Pill Sand Flames to protect him inside the 9 Dragon Divine Flame Dome, and Han Li had always felt rather guilty about this. In contrast, the Essence Fire Raven didn't seem to be bothered by this at all, and as soon as it was released, it began skipping around joyfully on the palm of Han Li's hand as it always did. I promise that I'll recover everything that you've lost, Han Li vowed in a solemn manner, and the silver figure nodded firmly in response. After that, Han Li raised a hand to send the dog-shaped black rock rising up into the air, following which the Essence Fire Raven transformed into a burst of silver flames that enveloped the entire rock. Plumes of black smoke began to rise up from the black rock, and its surface gradually melted away like a layer of ice. The black coloration became lighter and lighter, and it was as if layers were being peeled away from the exterior of the rock, gradually revealing the contents inside. Before long, the entire outer layer of black rock had melted away, revealing what appeared to be an ice crystal, encapsulated within which was a small, white, furry beast that was curled up into a ball. Zio Bai, Han Li couldn't help but exclaim at the sight of the beast. Indeed, the creature encased within the ice crystal was none other than the Pixiu that had traveled to the greater golden origin immortal region with Jin Tong, Zio Bai. Sang Tu and the others were very surprised by the fact that Han Li seemed to be familiar with the adolescent beast, but Han Li paid no heed to their reactions as he instructed the essence fire raven to melt away the final layer of ice. However, even after the ice had melted away, Zio Bai's eyes remained shut, and it was as if it were nothing more than a lifeless body. Han Li began scouring his gaze and spiritual sense over Zio Bai's body, and only then did he discover that even though Zio Bai had been freed from its self-imposed seal of ice, its soul remained in a state of slumber, as if it had been sealed away by its own bloodline power. Han Li could tell that this was an emergency self-preservation measure adopted by Zio Bai, but he had no idea how to awaken Zio Bai from this state. The Essence Fire Raven could see that Han Li was preoccupied with the task of awakening Zio Bai, so it vanished into his body on its own. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li channeled his spirit refinement technique, releasing his spiritual sense into Zio Bai's consciousness to try and awaken it. However, upon entering Zio Bai's consciousness, he discovered that there was nothing but a boundless expanse of darkness inside, and there seemed to be a burst of strange power that was sucking his spiritual deeper and deeper into the darkness. Han Li immediately withdrew his spiritual sense from Zio Bai's consciousness as a safety precaution upon sensing this strange suction force. He then attempted to awaken Zio Bai through the spiritual connection that existed between them. But as he projected his spiritual sense onto Zio Bai, his surroundings suddenly turned to complete darkness, just like the all-encompassing darkness in Zio Bai's consciousness. Right at this moment, a pair of giant, glowing eyes emerged within the darkness, and they projected a cold gaze onto Han Li. Before Han Li had a chance to figure out what was happening, he felt a burst of sharp pain in his consciousness, before snapping back to reality with a flabbergasted look on his face. "Can you save him?" Sang Tu asked. "This beast is an acquaintance of mine, but for some reason, his consciousness is completely enshrouded in darkness, and as soon as I attempt to awaken him, I see a pair of glowing eyes that reject my spiritual sense," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "That sounds like. Could it be that this beast is a descendant of one of the 8 ancient true spirit kings, the Inkai Pixiu?" Yun Bao exclaimed with a stunned expression, and Sang Tu's expression also changed drastically upon hearing this. "What's an Inkai Pixiu?" Han Li asked. The Inkai Pixiu was said to be a tribe of beings that possessed the most powerful ocular ability under the heavens, allowing them to see the essence of all things and identify all manners of treasures. There are even legends claiming that their eyes are able to see through the ethereal cycle of reincarnation and predict the futures of others, Yun Bao explained. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. It was true that Zio Bai possessed the ability to find hidden treasures, but he certainly wasn't able to see into the cycle of reincarnation or predict the future. Not only that, but it's said that the eyes of the Inkai Pixiu can also connect to a strange space, and that once an Inkai Pixiu develops to fully maturity, they'll be able to suck enemies into that space with just a single look. Unless the enemy is far more powerful than them, there's no way they'll be able to escape from that space, Yun Bao continued. Zio Bai does have a special space in his stomach that's completely isolated from the outside world, but I'm not aware of anything noteworthy about his eyes, Han Li mused. It seems like the entire Inkai Pixiu tribe was wiped out after the Inkai Pixiu True Spirit King disappeared. Even to this day, it's extremely rare to see descendants of the Inkai Pixiu tribe. If we can take him to 8 Plains Mountain, he'll surely be regarded as a precious treasure by all of the primordial tribes, and the true Spirit King will definitely be able to wake him up, Sang Tu said. A hesitant look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon hearing this. His original intention was to find a place to cultivate in seclusion, until he reached the early Great Encompassment stage and recovered all his Time Dao runes, at which point he would travel to the greater Golden Origin Immortal region in anticipation for the Reincarnation Palace mission. But he had to reconsider his plans now. After some contemplation, he decided to save Bai first. Once Bai woke up, he would be able to ask him about what happened in the Nine Origins Temple, thereby giving him better chances of saving Jin Tong while carrying out the Reincarnation Palace mission. With that in mind, Han Li declared, "I'm willing to accompany you to Eight Plains Mountain to save Bai." Sang Tu and Yun Bao's expressions both changed slightly upon hearing this, and the former immediately said, "Our Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe can complete that task on our own." Yun Bao gave a cold harumph, but didn't say anything. After all, Bai had been found by the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe, and was still on the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe's territory, so he had no right to speak on the matter. "Are you planning to move your entire tribe to Eight Plains Mountain, Chief Sang Tu?" Han Li asked. "Of course not. I'll only be taking the most capable warriors of our tribe for the journey," Sang Tu replied. "In that case, what's going to become of the rest of your brethren? Don't forget that none of the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe's most capable warriors are going anywhere," Han Li said in a meaningful voice, and a sheen of cold sweat instantly beaded up on Sang Tu's forehead upon hearing this. If he were to take Bai to Eight Plains Mountain, then the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe would be backed into a corner and be left with no choice but to kill all of the Silver Horn Rhinoceros beings that were left behind. Even if they were to be rewarded by the true Spirit King for delivering Bai to Eight Plains Mountain, it would hardly matter if their entire tribe were wiped out. "I'm willing to work with the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe to deliver Bai to Eight Plains Mountain," Sang Tu conceded, and Yun Bao cast a grateful glance toward Han Li upon hearing this. "After the two of you depart, your tribes will be without their leaders, and eventually word of this is inevitably going to spread to the other nearby tribes, which could view this as a potential opportunity to strike. Hence, not only do the two of you have to work together, your two tribes must also join forces and look out for one another in each other's time of need. Otherwise, there's a good chance that neither of your tribes will still exist by the time that you're back," Han Li continued. Sang Tu and Yun Bao both displayed reluctant expressions to the idea, and it was clear that this was a rather difficult notion for them to stomach. The two tribes had been in conflict with one another for millions of years, so how could they possibly set their differences aside and work together at the drop of a hat? "I understand that this may be a difficult proposition for you to accept, but you don't need to be allies forever. Just maintain this alliance until the two of you are back from the blood inheritance ceremony, and you'll be free to do whatever you want after that," Han Li said with a smile. Sang Tu and Yun Bao were both silent for a long while, following which both of them nodded in unison. "Thank you for pointing out a path forward for us, Senior. We'll do as you say." "There's no need to refer to me as Senior. Just call me Shi Mu or fellow Taoist Shi. By the way, when is this blood inheritance ceremony set to begin?" Han Li asked. "It was announced 30 years ago that the ceremony would commence in 100 years, so we have less than 70 years left. The journey to Eight Plains Mountain will be quite a lengthy one, so we'll have to set off soon," Sang Tu replied. At this point, Han Li had already essentially become the joint leader of the two tribes, and he instructed, "In that case, go back to your tribes right away and make the necessary arrangements. We'll depart as soon as possible." Sang Tu and Yun Bao gave a collective, affirmative response, following which both of them promptly departed. Sang Tu declared that this tent would be reserved for Han Li for now, and that no one was to approach the tent without permission. Han Li sat in the tent for a moment, then swept a sleeve through the air to open the flower branch domain. After that, he picked up Xiao Bai in his arms and stepped into the bamboo pavilion in the domain. As soon as Han Li set foot into the flower branch domain, he was immediately struck by the feeling that something wasn't right. Before he had a chance to think about it, he was overcome by a rumbling commotion interspersed with ghostly shrieks that constantly varied in pitch, making for an extremely unpleasant cacophony of noises. He could feel his own mental state starting to become affected, and he hurriedly channeled his spirit refinement technique to stabilize his own soul before turning to the direction that the noise was coming from, upon which he discovered that the source of the commotion was none other than the pavilion that Weeping Soul was currently staying in. At this moment, the entire pavilion was enshrouded within a cloud of black mist that was as viscous as ink, and it had formed a swirling, black vortex with ghostly figures flashing in and out of sight within, causing the restrictions around the pavilion to tremble incessantly. Thankfully, those restrictions had been personally set up by Han Li and had been infused with his time law powers. Otherwise, they most likely wouldn't have been able to contain the black vortex. What's going on? Han Li hurriedly flew over to the pavilion before injecting a wisp of spiritual sense into it. But as soon as his spiritual sense entered the black vortex, it was immediately devoured, and a burst of formidable devouring force surged out of the vortex, attempting to infiltrate his mind. Han Li hurriedly withdrew his spiritual sense, and only then was he able to shrug off the strange, devouring force. At the same time, a hint of elation appeared on his face. This phenomenon was definitely being caused by Weeping Soul, and that indicated that she had made a breakthrough in her absorption of Ghost King Wu Kao's power. A contemplative look then appeared on his face as he pondered how to proceed. This wasn't something that he could intervene in, so he would just have to count on Weeping Soul to get through this on her own. With that in mind, he swept a sleeve through the air to release dozens of streaks of golden light, which descended near the pavilion to create an even sturdier golden light barrier. This light barrier was also imbued with time law powers, and it resonated with the restrictions inside the pavilion to fortify one another. Much of the commotion ringing out in the pavilion was instantly stifled, and it no longer had any effect on Han Li, who made his way to the newly constructed pavilion beside the spirit medicine garden. The entire pavilion was laden with all types of ores, materials, and immortal treasures that he had gathered from the Tai Sui Immortal Manor, and some of the larger spirit materials were piled up on the ground outside the pavilion. As for the spirit plants and spirit medicines he had obtained from the Tai Sui Immortal Manor, there were too many of them to count. Han Li set Xiao Bai down on the top floor of the pavilion, then set up a protective restriction. After that, he began to inspect all of the treasures in and out of the pavilion with a look of mixed emotions on his face. While he was certainly ecstatic to have collected such a massive haul, there were so many things here that sorting through them was going to be a huge pain. Having said that, if he could sell everything, then he would be able to earn an astronomical sum of immortal origin stones. He had constantly been busy with other things since departing from the Tai Sui Immortal Manor, and he finally had some free time to take stock of everything. He flipped a hand over to produce a blank jade slip, then began carefully tallying, categorizing, and recording all of the treasures in the pavilion. After a day of work, everything inside the pavilion had been organized, so he made his way outside to record all of the spirit materials and spirit plants there as well. After doing all of that, Han Li sat down near the pavilion, then swept a sleeve through the air to release an assortment of items, all of which seemed to be storage tools. These storage tools had been gathered from cultivators that had met their demise in the Tai Sui Immortal Manor, and the collection was sure to contain a sizable amount of wealth. The most valuable of all of the storage tools were undoubtedly those that once belonged to Shi Chan and Lan Yuanzi. Han Li had roughly inspected the contents of Shi Chan's storage tool in the past, but hadn't yet gotten the chance to conduct a detailed inspection. He picked up Shi Chan's storage tool before emptying its contents, and a huge mountain of items instantly appeared on the ground. Sure enough, Shi Chan didn't disappoint. She possessed tremendous wealth, and even if all of the materials and immortal treasures were to be disregarded, she still had over 20 million immortal origin stones. There were around 30 to 40 of these immortal origin stones that were particularly worthy of note in that they were even larger than mid-grade immortal origin stones, and they were radiating dazzling light that was giving off astonishing immortal spiritual power fluctuations. Are these high-grade immortal origin stones? Han Li's eyes lit up as he picked up one of those special immortal origin stones, and a burst of vast and pure immortal spiritual power instantly surged into his body, making him feel as if he were bathing in a hot spring. The sensation was so blissful that he was almost unable to suppress the urge to moan out loud. A wide grin appeared on his face as he looked down at the immortal origin stone in his hand. Even though he had never seen one before, he was certain that this was a high-grade immortal origin stone, and the immortal spiritual power that it contained was far purer and more concentrated than even the immortal spiritual power in his body. With an immortal origin stone like this, he would most likely be able to fully replenish his immortal spiritual power reserves within the span of just a few seconds. However, high-grade immortal origin stones were extremely precious, and it would be far too wasteful to use them for immortal spiritual power replenishment. Han Li had read from some scriptures that there were many brilliant uses for high-grade immortal origin stones, including refining high-grade immortal treasures, assisting in making breakthroughs, and even severing corpse souls. After playing with the high-grade immortal origin stones for a while, he carefully stowed them away, then stowed away the other immortal origin stones as well. He then categorized all of the other items in Shi Chan's storage tool before moving on to Lan Yuanzi's storage tool. Back in the Ian Pagoda, he had taken Lan Yuanzi's storage tool after capturing him. With that, Han Li repeated the process, emptying out everything in the storage tool before categorizing them as well. Lan Yuanzi's storage tool only contained fewer than 7 million immortal origin stones, and there wasn't even a single high-grade immortal origin stone among them. After that, Han Li sorted his way through the rest of the storage tools as well. The owners of these storage tools hadn't been particularly advanced in cultivation base, so the sum of all of the immortal origin stones in those storage tools combined only amounted to fewer than 5 million. Han Li placed all of these immortal origin stones into his own storage tool, and he was unable to suppress a pleased smile. Prior to this, he only had fewer than 10 million immortal origin stones in his possession, yet his wealth had more than quadrupled. On top of that, by his estimates, he would be able to double this wealth once again once he sold all of the treasures around him. Han Li picked out all of the treasures inside and outside the pavilion that could be of use to him, then put on his reincarnation palace before putting up all of the rest of the treasures for sale. There were so many treasures that it took him over a month to sell the majority of them, netting himself over 30 million more immortal origin stones, and that was only because Han Li had sold them all for low prices as he was in a hurry to do so. Otherwise, the earnings would have been even more substantial. The rest of the items were rather special and difficult to sell, so he would just have to wait and see if there would be any takers. In any case, he already had over 70 million immortal origin stones, and that was enough for him to use for a very long time. Such a vast number of immortal origin stones would be considered an immense amount of wealth, even for great encompassment cultivators, and his personal wealth currently outweighed that of some of the largest sects in some small immortal regions. With so many immortal origin stones at his disposal, he was confident that he would be able to afford the time-law materials that he needed. Unfortunately, such materials were extremely rare, so even if he had the immortal origin stones, he would have to wait for such items to present themselves. Right at this moment, Han Li raised an eyebrow and flew out of the flower branch domain to arrive in the tent outside. "Senior Shimyu." Sang Tu's voice rang out from outside, but he didn't step into the tent. At this moment, Sang Tu and Yun Bao were both standing outside the tent, and each of them was accompanied by around a dozen subordinates. Docked behind them was a bone flying boat that was 400 to 500 feet in length, but it had been constructed from very ordinary materials, and there were two winged tiger demon beasts tied to it. Behind the flying boat were several smaller flying boats and carriages that were laden with cargo, and they were also being drawn by the same type of winged tiger demon beasts. It was clear that the time of departure had arrived, and Han Li instructed, "Come in." "All of the preparations are already complete, Senior Shimyu. When should we set off?" Sang Tu asked in a respectful manner. "Let's set off right away," Han Li replied. With that, he emerged from the tent, and he was personally escorted by Sang Tu and Yun Bao to the finest room on the flying boat. The boat then began to glow as it rose up into the air, following which the pair of winged tiger beasts spread their wings and took flight. The two winged beasts were only at the golden immortal stage, but they were able to fly extremely quickly, displaying speed that wasn't inferior to some high zenith cultivators. Of course, Han Li had better flying boats in his collection that could speed up the journey, but he refrained from bringing them out as they could expose him as a human. "I'm going to go into seclusion. Don't bother me unless something important comes up," he instructed, and Sang Tu and Yun Bao hurriedly gave affirmative responses before departing. Han Li was quite pleased with their displays of obedient subordination, and he set up some restrictions in the room, then entered the flower branch domain and sat down in the bamboo pavilion. While it was true that everything that he had recently sold had earned him a great deal of wealth, those weren't the biggest spoils that he had reaped from the Tai Sui immortal manor. With a sweep of his sleeve, Han Li summoned a collection of 4 items. The first one was a golden scroll that was bound by a thin, golden string, and it was the scroll that had been present on the same altar as the Aeon Divine Lamp. The second item was a purple jade slip, which contained the 5 lightning true mantra that had been given to him by the dark heaven's devilish deity. The third item was the Aeon Divine Lamp, and the final one of the 4 items was the diagram for the Almighty Sword formation. These 4 items, in addition to the white fire bead, were the biggest spoils that he had reaped from the Tai Sui immortal manor. Out of the 4 items, Han Li picked up the golden scroll. He had roughly examined all 3 of the other items before, but he was still yet to open this scroll, so he didn't know what it was. However, the fact that it had been placed together with the Aeon Divine Lamp indicated that it was definitely no ordinary scroll. Han Li loosened the golden string and unfurled the scroll with a hopeful look on his face. The words Aeon True Mantra were inscribed onto the cover of the scroll in antiquated characters, and the title immediately gave Han Li a good idea of what the contents of the scroll were. Just as he guessed, the scroll contained a time attribute cultivation art that allowed one to attain flames of eons, which were capable of bringing all things to decay and demise. Han Li carefully read through the golden scroll, and it took him almost an entire day to finish it, upon which an elated look appeared on his face as he picked up the Aeon Divine Lamp. The Aeon True Mantra was extremely profound, and while it couldn't compare with the great five elemental illusion mantra, it was still one of the true mantra sect's premium time attribute cultivation arts. However, Han Li's elation didn't come from obtaining this cultivation art. Instead, it arose from the fact that the cultivation art contained the refinement method for the Aeon Divine Lamp. With its flame snuffed out, the Aeon Divine Lamp had been reduced to something that was completely useless, and Han Li was naturally eager to restore it to its former glory. With that in mind, Han Li stowed the five lightning true mantra and the almighty sword formation diagram away. He was originally planning to study those two items closely, but now that he had found the refinement method for the Aeon Divine Lamp, that took priority above all else. Han Li unfurled the Aeon True Mantra once again, then directed his attention to the section where the refinement method was recorded. Even though the refinement method was laid out, it was not going to be easy to execute, particularly because he had only just obtained the Aeon True Mantra. The refinement method wasn't all that complex, as long as one was already cultivating the Aeon True Mantra. For such a cultivator, all they would have to do was slowly nurture the Aeon Divine Lamp with their time law powers. Even though the great five elemental illusion mantra that Han Li was cultivating was far more profound than the Aeon True Mantra, he couldn't use it to refine the Aeon Divine Lamp. As one of the three paramount laws, the laws of time were extremely difficult to cultivate, so he absolutely could not cultivate the Aeon True Mantra and the great five elemental illusion mantra simultaneously. Otherwise, something could easily go awry in his cultivation, leading to catastrophic consequences. The reason why Patriarch Myro hadn't tried to teach Han Li any of the true mantra sect's many time attribute secret techniques was precisely because he was afraid that Han Li would bite off more than he could chew and take on too much at once. However, just because he wasn't going to cultivate the Aeon True Mantra didn't mean that it would be impossible for him to refine the Aeon Divine Lamp. With that in mind, he raised a hand, and the golden flame that he had obtained from the altar in the Aeon Pagoda appeared over the palm of his hand. Immediately thereafter, he summoned the time-severing torch as well, and at the same time, a flurry of spiritual sense threads flew out of his glabella. The time-severing torch began to release bursts of time law powers, and Han Li injected these time law powers and his spiritual sense into the golden fireball in unison. The golden flame instantly swelled to around twice its original size, and it also began churning violently. The time law powers from the time-severing torch, the golden flame's own time law powers, and Han Li's spiritual sense threads were all clashing against one another in a chaotic fashion. All the while, Han Li was making a rapid string of hand seals, controlling the time-severing law powers and his spiritual sense threads to ensure that they were interacting with the golden flame's law powers in a manner that he desired. In doing so, he was able to alter the time-severing law powers to simulate the law powers of the golden Aeon flame. This was a spirit conversion technique that had been taught to him by Patriarch Myro, and it allowed him to use his spiritual sense as a medium to use one type of law powers to simulate another. Due to the fact that almost all of the immortal treasures in Han Li's possession had been taken from others, he was simply unable to use many of them, and he had brought up this problem to Patriarch Myro. This was not something that was out of the ordinary. Generally speaking, it was quite rare for a cultivator to obtain an immortal treasure that just so happened to correspond with the law powers that they were cultivating, unless that immortal treasure had been refined specifically for them. As a result, cultivators were often unable to unleash the full power of the immortal treasures in their possession. Powerful cultivators in the True Mantra sect had invented this True Mantra spirit conversion technique to remedy this exact problem, allowing the cultivator to simulate other types of law powers in order to make better use of their immortal treasures. Of course, there couldn't be too much of a disparity between the two types of law powers. They had to be of the same attribute, and ideally, they should also possess similar properties. The true mantra spirit conversion technique couldn't allow one to perfectly replicate a specific type of law powers, but it could certainly produce a very similar product. Time-severing laws and Ian laws were fundamentally quite similar, so there was a very good chance that the true mantra spirit conversion technique would yield a successful outcome. Chi had most likely used the same technique to gain control over the Ian divine lamp. Initially, Han Li was very unfamiliar with the true mantra spirit conversion technique, and the time-severing laws were constantly clashing violently with the Ian laws. However, as he became more and more well-versed with the secret technique, the conflict between the two types of law powers began to slowly subside. A hint of elation flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. Ali. Several years flew by in a flash. The journey had been quite smooth up to this point. The convoy was attacked by some primordial beasts on several occasions, but Sang Tu and Yun Bao were able to deal with them with relative ease. However, Sang Tu and Yun Bao didn't dare to let any complacency creep in, and they patrolled the surrounding area in shifts, constantly on the lookout for potential danger. At this moment, Sang Tu and another silver-horned rhinoceros being were patrolling the convoy, and the latter took a glance at Han Li's room, then asked through voice transmission, "Chief, do you think Senior she really wants to help us? I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't the right decision to give him that adolescent Pixiu." "Shush, Senior she is far more powerful than us, so even your voice transmissions could be overheard by him." Sang Tu scolded in a stern manner, and the silver-horned rhinoceros being immediately fell into a fearful silence. The two of them stared at Han Li's room in a tense silence for a long while, but nothing happened, and only then did they heave a collective sigh of relief. "You think I don't know all of that? The problem is that Senior she is far too powerful for us to oppose. On top of that, the little Pixiu is so precious that if we were to deliver it to 8 Plains Mountain with the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe on our own, then that would only spell disaster for us. Not only will we not be rewarded, we'll be torn to shreds by other envious tribes. Hence, regardless of what Senior she's objectives are, we have no choice but to rely on him, so make sure you don't say anything like that ever again, and also forbid everyone else from discussing Senior she." Sang Tu ordered through voice transmission in an even quieter voice. "Your foresight is truly unmatched, Chief," the silver-horned rhinoceros being praised with a look of admiration in his eyes. Sang Tu was just about to say something else when a dull thump suddenly rang out from Han Li's room. Sang Tu and the silver-horned rhinoceros being were both given a massive fright, thinking that Han Li had overheard their conversation, but there was no follow-up to the loud thump, and the two men were left staring at each other with perplexed expressions. At this moment, Han Li was sitting in the bamboo pavilion in the flower branch domain, looking extremely disheveled. His clothes and hair had been severely singed, while many parts of his body had been charred black, and the Ian flame was nowhere to be seen. Despite this, his eyes were glowing with elation. After 6 years of tireless effort, he had finally managed to successfully emulate Ian laws using the true mantra spirit conversion technique. In a moment of elation, he failed to control the law powers in his hands, thereby causing the Ian flame to explode, and that had almost resulted in severe injuries. After taking a pill, he quickly recovered from his injuries, then sat down with his legs crossed and picked up the Ian divine lamp. After that, he summoned his time-severing torch, and bursts of time-severing law powers surged out of the torch, then quickly came together to form a golden flame that was giving off very similar law power fluctuations to the Ian flame. The counterfeit Aeon flame flew forward to envelop the Aeon divine lamp at his behest, and it slowly fused into the lamp. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up upon seeing this, and he hurriedly began refining the Aeon divine lamp in accordance with the method outlined in the Aeon True Mantra. A layer of faint, golden light instantly appeared over the lamp's surface, and Han Li heaved a long sigh of relief upon seeing this. It seemed that his efforts had not been in vain. After that, he conjured up several more balls of counterfeit Aeon flames, and continued to slowly refine the Aeon divine lamp. As the process wore on, the golden light emanating from the Aeon divine lamp grew brighter and brighter, and the time-law power fluctuations that it was giving off also became more and more pronounced. Finally, after 3 months of tireless refinement, a golden flame finally appeared in the lamp. In the instant that the Aeon divine lamp was lit, it immediately released a burst of incredibly potent time-law power fluctuations that spread through the entire flower branch domain, causing all of the world's origin chi in the domain to churn violently. With that, the Aeon divine lamp had been restored to its former glory. Han Li was ecstatic to see this, and he quickly made a hand seal, upon which a fiery, golden dragon shot out of the flame in the Aeon divine lamp at his behest. The fiery, golden dragon circled around in the air above the flower branch domain, letting loose long, draconic roars as it did so. The golden light radiating from its body was almost too bright to directly look at, and the law powers that it was giving off were also extremely formidable, even more so than when the Aeon divine lamp had been under the control of Taoist master Tao Yin and Qi Mozi. The nearby space began to tremble violently, as if it were unable to withstand the fiery dragon's fearsome might, and an alarmed look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. He had no idea what was going to happen if the space within the flower branch domain were to shatter, and with that in mind, he hurriedly withdrew the fiery dragon, which quickly vanished into the flame of the Aeon divine lamp at his behest. He then cast his gaze toward the Aeon divine lamp as he thought back to that almighty, fiery dragon, and he could help but wonder why the Aeon divine lamp was so powerful in his hands. Unbeknownst to him, the reason that the fiery dragon had been so powerful was because he was cultivating the Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra. The Great Five Elemental Illusion Mantra was an unfathomably profound time attribute cultivation art that had been derived from the most fundamental 5 elements of heaven and earth, and the time-law powers derived from it were of an exceptional caliber, far higher than that of Qi Mozi. Hence, the simulated Aeon flame was also more formidable, thereby allowing him to tap into more of the Aeon divine lamp's power. After withdrawing the fiery dragon, Han Li continued to refine the Aeon divine lamp. Even though he was now able to control the lamp, he was far from proficient at it, and he had to further refine the lamp in order to fully make it his own. However, refining the Aeon divine lamp wasn't a task that required his full attention, so he decided to pull out the almighty sword formation diagram and the 5 lightning true mantra while he was at it. First, he picked up the jade slip that contained the 5 lightning true mantra, and after carefully reading through its contents, he couldn't help but be stunned by what he saw. This was truly an extraordinary cultivation art, as expected of something that had received such high praise from the dark heaven's devilish deity. According to the 5 lightning true mantra, the lightnings of the world consisted of 36 heavenly lightnings, 72 earth lightnings, and 108 cloud lightnings. The majority of the lightnings that Han Li had witnessed in the past had all been cloud and earth lightnings, while the 36 heavenly lightnings were all extremely powerful and rare. His divine Devilbane lightning was one of the 72 earth lightnings, as was the bone-rinsing golden lightning in the gray realm's baleful cleansing pond. However, the 2 lightnings had been combined by his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords to form a new type of lightning, one that was very close in power to heavenly lightnings. The 5 Lightning True mantra also contained many lightning attribute secret techniques that opened Han Li's eyes to possibilities that he had never even considered before. However, Han Li decided not to read too deep into the 5 Lightning True mantra. Its contents were far too profound, and he didn't specialize in using lightning attribute cultivation arts, so at the very most, he would only cultivate several of the secret techniques in the Jade Slip. With that in mind, the 5 Lightning True mantra was almost wasted in his hands. After reading through the 5 Lightning True mantra, Han Li stowed it away before picking up the Almighty Sword formation diagram. He released his spiritual sense to envelop the formation diagram, and to his surprise, he was able to inject his spiritual sense into it without any resistance. All of a sudden, an immense torrent of information surged into his mind. There was so much information that it took him quite some time to completely digest it, even with his tremendous spiritual sense, and an ecstatic look appeared on his face. The formation diagram contained the methods for setting up and using the Almighty Sword formation. Han Li had witnessed more than his fair share of sword formations in the past, but none of those sword formations could even hold a candle to this Almighty Sword formation. Technically, the Almighty Sword formation wasn't a pure sword formation. Instead, it communicated with the great Tao of heaven-earth through the medium of a sword formation, and it was truly befitting of the prefix of Almighty. This formation diagram was the foundation of the Almighty Sword formation, and it was devoid of attributes, so there were no attribute requirements when it came to the flying swords used. As long as one could gather 36 flying swords of any attribute, they would be able to set up the Almighty Sword formation. Of course, the flying swords used had to be of a very high caliber. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand the immense power of the formation. Han Li was very pleased to see this, as his azure bamboo cloud swarm swords fulfilled both the quantity and quality prerequisites to support the sword formation. The Almighty Sword formation was incredibly profound, and even with Han Li's comprehension ability, he found himself having to read through the contents of the formation diagram very slowly. Right at this moment, a burst of crimson light suddenly appeared on his body. He raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, then set down the Almighty Sword formation diagram before putting on his reincarnation palace mask. As it turned out, someone had responded to his advertisement expressing his desire to purchase items that contained time law powers. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up, and he made a hand seal, upon which a projection of a humanoid figure emerged from his reincarnation palace mask. It appeared to be a young man with a head of slightly curly black hair, and even though his face was concealed by his mask, he still gave off an air of natural and unrestrained grace. The words Ape 3 were visible on his mask. "I've heard much about you, fellow Taoist Dragon 5, Ape 3 said as he cupped his fist in a salute. "Do you have any time attribute law materials for me?" Han Li asked, cutting straight to the chase. "Of course, why else would I have contacted you?" Ape 3 replied as he flipped a hand over to produce a fist-sized, water droplet-shaped blue crystal. Even though it was only a projection, Han Li could clearly see the specks of golden light in the crystal, like rays of sunlight shimmering in rippling water. Han Li's eyes immediately lit up as he identified the blue crystal to be a water divination time crystal. This is a premium water divination time crystal. It may not be that large, but I assure you that it contains immense time law powers, enough to refine even a 5th-tier immortal treasure, Ape 3 introduced with a smile. Han Li nodded in response. Even though he could only see a projection, he could tell that the water divination time crystal didn't contain any less time law powers than the Fire Age firefly nests that he had obtained in the past. "How many immortal origin stones would you like for it?" Han Li asked. I exhausted almost all of my savings to obtain this water divination time crystal, and I'm not planning to sell it for immortal origin stones. Ape 3 replied with a shake of his head. Would you like to exchange it for something then? Hanley asked. I suppose you can say that. To put it more accurately, I want to make a deal with you, Ape 3 replied with a smile. Go ahead. Hanley prompted. I can tell that you're a direct and straightforward person, so I won't waste any time talking in circles. Right now, I'm in urgent need of a batch of time attribute Tao pills. I heard that you've refined such pills in the past, and that's why I've come to you. I have enough ingredients to refine 10 time attribute Tao pills, and I would like you to refine 5 time attribute Tao pills for me. If you can do that, then I'm willing to part with this water divination time crystal, Ape 3 explained. What if I'm unable to refine 5 time attribute Tao pills? Hanley asked. If you're unable to fulfill my request, then I'm afraid the deal will have to fall through, Ape 3 replied. Hanley's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Even though he was capable of refining Tao pills, refining 5 time attribute Tao pills using only 10 batches of materials was extremely difficult, and he didn't have absolute confidence in his ability to fulfill such a tall order. I don't mean to be rude, but this deal is completely skewed in your favor. I'm providing all of the ingredients, and all you have to do is provide your pill refinement expertise. If you manage to successfully refine 5 time attribute Tao pills, then you can have this water divination time crystal. Even if you fail, you don't risk losing anything, so what could you possibly be hesitating about? Ape 3 asked with a hint of displeasure in his voice. Please don't misunderstand, fellow Taoist Ape 3. I fully intend to take you up on your deal. It's just that I have some questions that I would like to have answered first, Hanley said. Ape 3's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he prompted, Go ahead. Do you have a minimum tier requirement for the time Tao pills refined? Hanley asked. Of course. They must at least be second-tier Tao pills, but rest assured, the primary ingredients that I've provided to you contain immense time law powers, enough to refine even third-tier Tao pills, Ape 3 replied with a smile, and Hanley nodded in response. If you have any questions or concerns, then please state them now. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings that could result in this deal falling through, Ape 3 continued. Fellow Taoist Ape 3, I can tell that you're also very well versed in the art of pill refinement, so I'm sure that you're aware that luck plays a very important role in pill refinement. Successfully refining 5 Tao pills using 10 batches of materials is a very tall order, even for the most seasoned Tao pill masters. I'll be sure to do my best, but if I fail, then would you be willing to accept however many Tao pills I'm able to successfully refine, in addition to a sum of immortal origin stones for the water divination time crystal? I'm willing to offer 3 times the market price for the crystal on top of the Tao pills that I managed to successfully refine, Hanley requested in an earnest manner. I'm afraid I must refuse. I never go back on my word, so if you want my water divination time crystal, then you'll have to fulfill my request. If you fail, then I won't sell the crystal to you even if you offer me 10 times the price, Ape 3 replied in a firm and unyielding manner. Hanley's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he proposed, How about this? If I only manage to refine less than 4 Tao pills, then that will be the end of the matter. However, if I manage to refine 4 Tao pills, would you be willing to sell the water divination time crystal to me? I already told you that I won't accept anything less than 5 time attribute Tao pills for my water divination time crystal. If you insist on continuing to try and alter the terms of our agreement, then let's end discussions right here, Ape 3 replied in a cold voice. Fine, we'll do as you say then, Hanley sighed. Ape 3's expression eased slightly upon hearing this, and he swept a sleeve through the air, upon which a storage ring and a white jade slip appeared in the item teleportation formation in front of Hanley. Hanley picked up the ring and the jade slip, then injected his spiritual sense into the latter. The jade slip contained a Tao pill recipe, and it was one that was completely different from the Tao pill that he had refined in the past. The primary ingredient was something similar to water divination time crystals, while most of the other ingredients were also different, but the relationships between the ingredients were roughly the same as the ones in the previous pill recipe. This came as quite a relief to Han Li. As long as the relationships between the ingredients hadn't changed too drastically, he would be able to make use of his prior Tao pill refinement experience. He then picked up the storage ring and inspected its contents to discover that it contained 10 batches of ingredients, all of which were abundant with spiritual power. "I'll be sure to get started as soon as possible. Is there a time limit that you'd like to impose?" Han Li asked. "Just have them ready within 10 years, Ape 3 replied, then instantly vanished from the spot, seemingly still a little displeased with Han Li. Han Li wasn't offended by this. Instead, he was rather intrigued by Ape 3's personality. It was quite rare to see someone so frank and genuine in the immortal realm. Han Li picked up the jade slip again, then closed his eyes to analyze its contents while simulating the pill refinement process in his mind. Close to a year later, Han Li opened his eyes as he gently exhaled. Over the course of the past year, he had studied the new pill refinement method to extremely painstaking detail and run through the pill refinement process repeatedly through his mind countless times. Last time, 9 batches of ingredients had been prepared for him, and he only had to succeed once, whereas he had to succeed 5 out of 10 times on this occasion, amounting to a far higher level of difficulty. Thankfully, both his pill refinement expertise and cultivation base were also significantly improved compared with last time, so he was relatively confident in his ability to complete the task. With that in mind, he drifted out of the flower branch domain to arrive in the room outside. After that, he dispelled the entrance to the flower branch domain, then released the essence fire child. "Stay here and keep a lookout. If any powerful enemies attack the convoy, kill them to ensure the convoy's safety," Han Li instructed. The essence fire child was becoming more and more intelligent of late, and it immediately nodded in response while patting its own chest, seemingly telling Han Li that he could count on it. Han Li patted the essence fire child on the head, then emerged from his room as a faint shadow and flew away into the distance without alerting anyone. It would be impossible to conceal the pill tribulations brought on by the refinement of Tao pills, and he didn't want the primordial beings in the convoy to see that. After departing from the convoy, Han Li quickly picked out a peaceful and secluded mountain, then dug out a crude cave abode and set up several layers of restrictions around it before commencing the pill refinement process. A black cloud was racing through the sky over the primordial land, and it contained an almighty primordial army consisting of all types of demon beasts of all types of different descriptions. At the very least, there were tens of thousands of demon beasts in the dark cloud, over half of which were tiger-like demon beasts, and the rest of the demon beasts all seemed to be rather fearful of these tiger-like creatures. At the center of the cloud was a black throne, seated upon which was a white-haired young man with a hostile expression. The young man appeared to be completely identical to a human cultivator, with no visible demonic physical traits. Standing around him were 7 or 8 powerful demon beasts, all of which were at the peak high zenith stage. "Congratulations, young master. The fact that our chief has sent you to participate in the blood inheritance ceremony on his behalf clearly indicates that he's already deemed you to be the next chief of our Zhao tribe," a brawny man that was built like an iron pagoda said with a fawning smile. The man had yellow tiger stripes on his face, indicating that he was a tiger demon. "Out of all of Father's children, I possess the most potent Taowu bloodline, so he should have chosen me as his heir long ago. He must be going senile to have delayed the decision for so long. The young man snapped in a cold and resentful manner. I'm sure our chief must have had his reasons, the tiger demon said in a hesitant manner. It's all because that senile old fart was constantly being swayed by my meddlesome siblings. If it isn't for the immense pressure from the heavenly court and my successful breakthrough to the great encompassment stage, he would most likely still be in a state of indecision. The young man harumphed coldly. Now that you've reached the great encompassment stage, none of your siblings can even begin to compare with you, so you can rest easy now, young master, a lion-like demon beast said. I still can't rest easy yet. My siblings have the support of many of our tribe's elders, so I can't afford to be complacent, the young man replied with a shake of his head. You're right, young master, the tiger demon agreed with a nod. In any case, no matter what they do, once I completely awaken my Taowu bloodline during the blood inheritance ceremony, none of them will be able to oppose me, the young man harumphed coldly. Your foresight is truly unmatched, young master. All of the powerful demons around the young man praised in unison. A faint smile appeared on the young man's face in the face of everyone's collective praise, but right as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed slightly as he turned in a certain direction. Everyone else quickly sensed something in that direction as well, and they turned to discover a vast expanse of radiant, golden light on the distant horizon, giving off formidable law power fluctuations alongside bursts of thunderous rumbling. What's going on over there? Is someone making a breakthrough? A white elephant demon asked. No, this is not a phenomenon triggered by a breakthrough. Instead, someone's refining Dao pills over there, and they're timed Dao pills to boot. I was just thinking about what offering I should make to the true Spirit King. The timing could not have been any more perfect, the young man said with an excited expression, then sprang out of the black cloud as a streak of white light, speeding directly toward the golden light. The young man was extraordinarily fast, and he quickly flew onto the scene before concealing himself in a white cloud in the distance. A large section of the sky up ahead had been illuminated a bright golden color, and vast law power fluctuations were surging out of the golden clouds, causing all of the world's origin chi within a radius of millions of kilometers to ripple violently. At the same time, the golden section of the sky felt incredibly heavy, and even the mountains down below were trembling incessantly, as if they were unable to bear the tremendous pressure. All of a sudden, an enormous golden vortex emerged within the golden clouds, and a beam of blinding, golden light that was imbued with devastating time, law powers came crashing down toward a small mountain down below. The white-haired young man could see that the mountain was surrounded by layers of restrictions, and a hint of fierce killing intent instantly flashed through his eyes as he came to the realization that there was an immortal region cultivator here. However, he then took a deep breath to forcibly suppress his killing intent. Right at this moment, a mountain that was thousands of feet in size appeared above the small mountain amid a flash of spiritual light. The mountain was golden in color and etched with countless golden and gray runes, all of which were glowing radiantly with golden and gray light. It was the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain. The beam of golden light that was descending out of the heavens crashed down onto the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain with an earth-shattering boom, but the mountain was able to withstand the pillar of pill tribulation, golden light, with only a slight shudder. However, that was far from the end of the pill tribulation. Shortly thereafter, another pillar of golden light that was far thicker than the previous one came crashing down from the heavens, and another earth-shattering boom rang out as much of the golden and gray light emanating from the integrated 5 Extremes Mountain was scattered. Before the scattered golden and gray light was able to completely recover, another thick pillar of golden light came crashing down from the golden clouds. This pillar of golden light was far more powerful than the previous two, giving off time-law power fluctuations that were several times more potent, and the golden and gray light emanating from the Golden Mountain instantly faded away upon impact. With the protective layer of golden and gray light eradicated, the pillar of golden light was able to strike the mountain itself, piercing over 100 feet deep into the mountain before finally fading away. The Golden Mountain was sent plummeting out of the sky, but it only descended several 100 feet before it was able to steady itself again. On top of that, another layer of golden and gray light reappeared over its surface in a span of mere seconds, and it appeared to be largely unscathed. What a formidable pill treasure! It looks like it can withstand even 5th or 6th tier pill tribulations. The white-haired young man's eyes lit up with excitement once again, and this time, his excitement was tinged with more than a hint of greed. After releasing those 3 pillars of golden light, the golden cloud had finally exhausted all of its power, and it quickly dissipated, returning the sky to its original state. The Golden Mountain rapidly shrank down before descending out of the sky, but right at this moment, countless white threads emerged out of thin air directly beneath it without any warning, and the mountain was instantly ensnared by the mass of white threads. As a result, all of its downward momentum was arrested, and it was completely immobilized and suspended in midair. At the same time, a vast expanse of white light appeared above the mountain, then transformed into a gargantuan white claw that came swooping down from above. The space beneath the claw began to collapse, forming a huge black hole that threatened to devour the Golden Mountain whole like a gaping mouth. All of a sudden, the Golden Mountain began trembling violently, and the rays of light that were as sharp as sword chi shot out of the mountain, hurtling toward the surrounding white threads and the giant, white claw. The rays of light were incredibly sharp, able to tear through the space in its path with ease, but the white threads were extraordinarily resilient, remaining completely unscathed in the face of the storm of golden light. As for the white claw, the rays of golden light weren't even able to reach it before they were devoured by the black hole beneath the claw. Right as the Golden Mountain was about to be caught by the massive, white claw, a burst of radiant, golden light suddenly erupted into the air from the mountain down below, then rapidly elongated to form a fiery, golden dragon that let loose a thunderous, draconic roar. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the Golden Mountain. The golden dragon coiled itself around the mountain, encompassing all of the white threads within its own body. The white threads began flashing with white light, but the white light was quickly smothered by the golden flames, and all of a sudden, the white threads began extremely frail, burning away just like any normal silken threads would. Immediately thereafter, the fiery, golden dragon sprang up and crashed violently into the giant, white claw, tearing it apart with ease before causing it to explode violently. On top of that, 9 bursts of fire simultaneously erupted out of the golden dragon's body, and they transformed into 9 slightly smaller fiery dragons that pounced in unison onto what appeared to be nothing more than empty space. A violent explosion of golden light ensued as that patch of space was shattered violently before being inundated by a sea of golden flames, which burned so intensely that the shattered space was beginning to display signs of melting. A figure stumbled out of thin air before flying away into the distance. It was none other than the white-haired young man, and in the blink of an eye, he was already several dozen kilometers away. His clothes were in tatters, and half of his body had also been charred black, as had most of his head of white hair, giving him a very sorry appearance. At the same time, Han Li flew out of the mountain down below, and the integrated 5 Extremes mountain quickly flew back up his sleeve at his behest. Back in the infernal frost Immortal manor, the roof of the Golden Palace where the high zenith pills had been held had a very similar pill tribulation transcending ability as the integrated 5 Extremes mountain. After the palace collapsed, Han Li had taken its roof, which he had then fused into the integrated 5 Extremes mountain to significantly enhance its power. "How dare you? Do you know who I am?" The white-haired young man roared in a furious voice as bright, white light erupted out of his body, and a white Chinese letter character appeared on his forehead. The burns on his body began to rapidly heal, while bright, scythe-like claws emerged from his fingertips, and a pair of large, white wings appeared on his back, while his aura swelled drastically. A tremendous, great encompassment stage aura erupted out of his body, sending incredibly powerful shockwaves sweeping through the air in all directions. Even Han Li couldn't help but stumble back a couple of steps in the face of these violent shockwaves. Before he had a chance to steady himself, the white-haired young man abruptly vanished from the spot, only to reappear behind Han Li an instant later, before thrusting his sharp claws viciously at Han Li's heart from behind. Rings of white light were proliferating out of his sharp claws, giving off bursts of peculiar law power fluctuations that crackled and popped in the air like firecrackers. The claws were able to tear through space with ease, gouging out a pair of large black holes. However, right as the claws were about to reach Han Li, an antiquated golden lamp suddenly appeared before them without any warning. Han Li had also turned around to face his assailant, and a wave of golden flames erupted out of the lamp at his behest, separating him from the white-haired young man before sweeping toward the latter. Having just experienced the power of the Aeon flames, the white-haired young man didn't dare to rush headfirst into them again, so he was forced to stop in his tracks with a look of alarm and frustration on his face. He was frustrated because the Immortal region cultivator's cultivation base was clearly inferior to his own, yet that powerful immortal treasures of his made him completely untouchable. At the same time, he was alarmed by the fact that Han Li was able to keep up with the speed of his attack. The Taowu was a primordial being renowned for its incredible speed, and there weren't many tribes in the entire primordial land that could compete with it in that regard. Not only did the white-haired young man possess the Taowu bloodline, he was also a great encompassment cultivator, so he had grown accustomed to being able to strike down his opponents with just a single blow, yet a mere human cultivator was somehow able to keep up with his speed. Right as the white-haired young man was about to spring back to distance himself from the golden flames, a wave of golden ripples surged out from within the flames, instantly encompassing the white-haired young man within it. The white-haired young man was instantly immobilized as a wave of formidable time-law power fluctuations washed over him. An alarmed look appeared on his face as he prepared to unleash his power to free himself from the golden ripples, but before he was able to do so, a fiery, golden dragon crashed into him with tremendous force before transforming into a radiant, golden sun that exploded violently. The nearby space was torn to shreds by an incredibly formidable burst of law power fluctuations, and the white-haired young man's body was also torn to pieces. Despite this, he was able to survive, and a furious roar erupted out of his body, while a burst of dazzling, white light shot out of his body, revealing itself to be a white boat. The boat was etched with countless primordial characters, as well as an image of countless beasts bowing in reverence. An enormous burst of time-law powers that wasn't inferior in the slightest to that of the Essence Fire Raven's white bead erupted out of the white boat, enveloping the white-haired young man's body before racing away into the distance. The golden ripples released by the mantra-treasured axis were torn apart, while the white quickly vanished into the distant sky as a white shadow. "You'll pay for this." The white-haired young man's resentful voice rang out in the distance, while Han Li looked on with a calm expression, making no effort to set off in pursuit as he knew that the white boat was far too fast for him to catch. Defeating a great encompassment cultivator so easily should have been a source of great pride for any peak-high zenith cultivator, Yet Han Li displayed no reaction as he drew the Aeon Divine lamp back into his grasp. Even though the white-haired young man was a great encompassment cultivator, his cultivation base was rather unstable, indicating that he had only recently reached the great encompassment stage. On top of that, he had made a fatal error of voluntarily getting close to Han Li, thereby sealing his own defeat. Right at this moment, a black cloud that was filled with all types of demon beasts appeared in the distance. It seemed that they were all allies of the white-haired young man, and the black cloud was racing toward Han Li with unstoppable might. However, as soon as all of the demon beasts in the black cloud witnessed what had just become of the white-haired young man, the black cloud instantly stopped in its tracks, following which it veered away sharply, fleeing the scene in the same direction as the white-haired young man. Han Li raised an eyebrow upon seeing this, but made no attempt to pursue the black cloud either. Even though he was able to defeat the white-haired young man using the Aeon Divine lamp, unleashing the lamp's power had expended most of his immortal spiritual power, so he was naturally unwilling to involve himself in any further conflicts. After taking a pill to aid in his immortal spiritual power recovery, he set off in pursuit of the convoy belonging to the Silver Horn Rhinoceros tribe and the Cloud Spot Tiger tribe. With the Essence Fire Raven still in the convoy, Han Li didn't have to worry about not being able to track it down. It only took Han Li close to a month to catch up to the convoy, and he snuck back into his cabin on the flying boat without attracting any attention. The Essence Fire Raven informed him that the convoy hadn't encountered any major peril during his absence, to which Han Li nodded in response before re-entering the Flower Branch domain. After that, he put on his Reincarnation Palace and began attempting to contact Ape 3. Shortly thereafter, a projection of Ape 3 appeared before him amid a flash of red light. "Why have you contacted me so urgently, fellow Taoist Dragon 5? Ape 3 asked in a rather cold voice, but there was a clear glimmer of hope in his eyes. Han Li offered no response as he flipped a hand over to produce a jade box, within which were 5 Longan-sized golden pills. Waves of rippling golden light were surging out of the pills before proliferating outward in all directions, and each pill had 3 golden Tao patterns on their surface, all of which were giving off incredibly profound time law power fluctuations. "Are those the Tao pills I asked for?" Ape 3 exclaimed as his eyes lit up. Once again, Han Li offered no response, letting the Tao pills do the talking for him. In order to refine these 5 Tao pills, he had pulled out all the stops, testing his own pill refinement expertise to its limits, while also using all of the auxiliary abilities at his disposal. As Ape 3 continued to examine the 5 pills, the surprise and elation in his eyes only grew more and more pronounced. "You truly are an exceptional pill refinement master, fellow Taoist Dragon 5. To think that it only took you half the allotted time to refine these 5-time Tao pills. I am in awe," Ape 3 said as he cupped his fist in an admiring salute. "You said that I had to have them ready within 10 years, so I naturally had no time to waste. On top of that, luck was on my side as well. Take a look and see if you're satisfied with the pills," Han Li said with a faint smile as he placed the jade box into the item teleportation formation before making a hand seal, and the box instantly vanished before reappearing in front of Ape 3, who immediately picked it up before conducting a close examination of the 5 Tao pills one by one. "There's nothing wrong with the pills, and all 5 of them are 3rd-tier Tao pills, which is much better than the outcome I anticipated. I'll throw in 1,000,000 extra Immortal Origin stones on top of the Water Divination Time crystal for your brilliant work," Ape 3 said with a pleased nod. "There's no need for any additional compensation. We agreed for you to give me the Water Divination Time crystal in exchange for 5-time Tao pills, so it wouldn't be right for me to take anything more from you," Han Li replied in a principled manner, and Ape Three's eyes lit up slightly upon hearing this. "It seems like you're a man after my own heart, fellow Taoist Dragon 5. If you're not opposed to the idea, I would love to befriend you. I don't have your pill refinement expertise, but I do have some connections that are particularly useful in gathering all types of rare materials, so I'm not completely useless," Ape 3 chuckled. "That sounds perfect to me," Han Li replied with a smile. Even though not much interaction had taken place between the two of them, the fact that Ape 3 was able to bring out that water divination time crystal and 10 batches of time Dao pill ingredients indicated that he did indeed have some avenues of time law material acquisition. He had refused the offer of 1,000,000 additional immortal origin stones precisely because he wanted to befriend Ape 3 to see if he could acquire more time law materials through him. So things had played out exactly as planned. "Now that I've obtained these 5 Dao pills, I need to go and arrange some things right away, so I won't chat with you any longer, fellow Taoist Dragon 5. If you ever visit 9 Origin City, make sure to come find me," Ape 3 said. 9 Origin City. Han Li's expression changed ever so slightly upon hearing this. He had heard of this city from Lan Yan, and it was a huge city near the 9 Origins Temple, as well as one of the largest cities in the greater Golden Origin Immortal region. Could it be that Ape 3 was from the 9 Origins Temple? Ape 3 sent the water divination time crystal to Han Li through the item teleportation formation, following which the communication was quickly cut off. Han Li removed his reincarnation palace mask, and a pleased smile appeared on his face as he looked down at the water divination time crystal in his hand. He then immediately channeled his great 5 elemental illusion mantra, conjuring up that golden ring to encircle the crystal. The water divination time crystal quickly disintegrated into countless water droplet-shaped specks of golden light, which then transformed into 41 time law threads, all of which wrapped themselves around the clear time vial. With this influx of time law threads, his time law powers had almost recovered to their peak. Han Li closed his eyes as he summoned his 5 time attribute law treasures, and he was very happy to see that they were revolving around him in a far smoother fashion than before. After stowing the 5 time attribute law treasures away, he pulled out the almighty sword formation diagram and continued to study it intently. He didn't know what was awaiting him on 8 Plains Mountain, so he couldn't afford to rest for even a single moment. The formation diagram hovered above his head, giving off a layer of gentle light that enshrouded his entire body. Profound sword formation permutations flowed out of the formation diagram and through Han Li's heart, rapidly deepening his understanding of the almighty sword formation. Several more years passed by in a flash, and 8 Plains Mountain finally appeared on the distant horizon. The primordial land was an unfathomably massive place, but it had been segmented into extremely irregularly shaped areas due to the presence of all of the immortal regions. 8 Plains Mountain was a very special place in the primordial land, in that out of all of the primordial land's countless mountain ranges and rivers, most of them originated from 8 Plains Mountain. Hence, it was no exaggeration to say that 8 Plains Mountain was the leader of all of the primordial land's mountain ranges and rivers. It was also exactly because of this that 8 Plains Mountain was the site where the alliance had been forged between the 8 true spirit kings, in an attempt to put an end to the chaotic, war-torn era of the primordial land, and the mountain had since become the holy mountain of the primordial land. On the summit of 8 Plains Mountain stood a circular palace that was constructed from a black stone material. The palace was sealed off on all 4 sides, and at its very center was a dark red brazier that was around half the height of an adult human. Burning inside the brazier was a golden flame that was casting countless shadows onto the surrounding walls. Placed around the palace were 8 stone chairs that were very simplistic in design, looking much like the crude stone chairs that one would expect to find in rural mortal villages. Behind each chair stood a stone statue that was around 10 feet tall, most of which depicted menacing beasts, but one of them was different from the rest. This statue resembled a white lion with a puffy mane and a pair of horns on its head. It had a pair of friendly-looking eyes, and trailing behind it was a long and thick tail, which was coiled to resemble a pristine white cloud. While all of the other chairs were empty, the stone chair in front of the statue was currently occupied by a white-robed middle-aged man with skin as fair as jade and a set of handsome facial features. His eyes resembled a pair of bottomless ponds, while each of his pupils was bordered by a ring of faint, golden light, much like reflections of bright moons within the ponds. The man had a pair of horns on his head that were curved backward, and there was a small goatee on his chin that wasn't very long, lending a bit of exuberance to his otherwise stoic facial features. At this moment, the man was holding a bamboo scroll, but his gaze was fixed on the brazier at the center of the palace, with a rather indecisive look on his face. Moments later, he turned his gaze away from the brazier in a pensive manner. It was back in this very palace that he and the other true spirit king had forged an alliance to bring peace to the primordial land for the first time in its history. However, right now, he was the only true spirit king left. He was the most intelligent of the 8 true spirit kings, by Z. It was said that he was the one who brought about the 8-king alliance in the first place. After that, he and the Inkaid Pixiu had worked together to establish a set of basic laws for the primordial land, and only then was the era of widespread chaos finally left behind. Back then, I had to go through so much trouble to gather all of you in one place, yet now, all of you have either left or died, leaving this whole mess behind for me to deal with on my own. How is that fair? Bai Zi complained as he swept his gaze over the 7 empty chairs in the palace. A wry smile then appeared on his face as he sighed. Over the years, the primordial flame has been burning weaker and weaker, while unrest continues to brew in the entire immortal realm. Our primordial land will most likely inevitably be swept up in the shifting tides, so the Usra blood gates will have to be opened, and all of you will have no choice but to come back. Bai Zi seemed to be rather pleased at this thought, and a smile appeared on his face as he stroked his own goatee. Ali. At the foot of 8 plains, mountains stood a black stone city. The city's walls were over 1,000 feet tall, and at the moment, its entrance was extremely busy, with one convoy after another entering the city in an unbroken stream. There was a rather small present, and it would have normally been very unremarkable, but it was made to appear quite out of place by all of the massive convoys around it. Sang Tu was standing in front of a carriage in the convoy with a concerned look on his face, and he rubbed his hands together nervously as he said, "We're about to reach Primordial Garrison City, Senior Shi. The checks conducted at the city gate are very stringent, and our 2 tribes most likely aren't of sufficient status to be granted entry, so we'll need you to show yourself, Senior." Han Li was naturally the one seated in the carriage. He had concealed his own aura on the entire journey here, and only when the convoy had been attacked by powerful demons had he displayed his power, striking down those demons with incredible ease. As a result, the 2 primordial tribes had developed a great deal of awe and veneration toward him. After all, power was respected even more so in the primordial land than in the immortal realm. Sang Tu and Yun Bao were unable to see anything wrong with Han Li's true spirit bloodline, but it would be very difficult to fool someone more powerful, and if it were exposed that he was a human, that would inevitably attract a lot of unnecessary trouble. Han Li was here to do something important, not to start trouble for himself. "It's fine, I'll step in if required," Han Li said in a calm manner, and Sang Tu felt very much reassured upon hearing this. Having witnessed Han Li's displays of power over the course of their journey here, he and Yun Bao had become very trusting of and dependent on him. He took a glance at Yun Bao, and the latter gave him a nod, following which the convoy continued onward. Having been traveling together for so long, their relationship had improved significantly, and some tacit understanding had developed between them. At around dusk, the convoy finally arrived at the city gate, where it was stopped by a pair of eagle-headed humanoid guards, each of which was wielding a halberd. "Which tribes are you from?" one of them asked,